Hi, everyone, and welcome to our GRC Summit Leadership Series event for September. This month, focusing on IT GRC and cybersecurity. The GRC Summit Leadership Series, hosted by MetricStream, is a focused sequence of virtual thought leadership sessions discussing trends, best practices in managing governance, risk, compliance, audit, and IT GRC programs, with a spotlight on resilience and performing with integrity. As you know by now, this series is conducted every month as a prelude to our biannual GRC Summit. And it covers in-depth analysis of current trends, regulatory changes, challenges, and best practices from mid-size and large-scale global enterprises. The monthly editions as part of this series delve into key focus areas like healthcare and life sciences, banking and financial services, third-party management, and today, cybersecurity. So the GRC Summit Leadership Series today, not only cybersecurity, but also IT GRC. This current sort of new normal of remote working has put the IT and cyber infrastructure of organizations to the real test. How can data be protected? How can weak links be strengthened? And how can the overall IT security of the firm be tracked, monitored, and kept resilient in this extended remote fashion to ensure uninterrupted business performance? This edition of the Summit Leadership Series offers you expert perspectives, best practices on how automation and quantification of IT and cyber risks in business terms can yield effective cyber management and delivering overall cyber resilience. So let's get started. I want to kick it over to Andy Diggelman, MetricStream CTO, for his opening remarks. Andy, over to you.
Thanks, Peter, and hello, everyone. As Peter mentioned, the purpose of today's event is to share peer insights and help you build resilience when it comes to your cyber and IT needs. Whether it is a pandemic, the economy, the extreme weather, or the smoke we have now in California, it's a reality that people need GRC and proactively manage their risks. In the GRC industry, exciting things are happening, and we're seeing them in all verticals and all markets. What we'll talk about today is how companies are dealing with IT GRC and cybersecurity specifically. In 2020, resilience has become table stakes for cyber leaders. Cybersecurity is now operationally forced by the pandemic, legislatively required by governments, internally compelled by executive management and the board, externally bulldozed by cyber attacks, technologically enabled by AI and automation, and finally, experientially desired by customers. It's been fascinating to see how swiftly organizations realign priorities in this time of crisis. Here are some highlights of where IT and cyber play a role in today's GRC world. Aligning business goals and IT cyber programs. Evaluating cyber risks while considering at least these two main questions. Number one, what do our customers expect of us? And number two, how do peer companies approach these risks? Then maintaining business operations in spite of cyber incidents and crises. Working with business continuity and crisis teams to ensure business operations continue without disruptions. Developing incident management and response plans. Reduce the impact of cyber risks by early detection, containment, mitigation, and communication of cyber incidents. Adhering to data privacy regulations. Ensuring compliance with GDPR in Europe and the California Consumer Protection Act in the United States, while also maintaining data loss prevention programs in case of ransomware attacks. Simplifying internal communications and analytics. Providing a clear understanding of the value at risk to executive management by adopting cyber risk quantification methodologies and prioritizing cybersecurity investments accordingly. leveraging AI and automation, achieve main KPIs of cybersecurity success, real-time detection, recovery and response with AI, and with security orchestration, automation and response technologies providing the highest returns on investment. Let me highlight some examples of how some of our customers are achieving visibility, agility, and efficiency gains with MetricStream applications. A globally renowned medical institution has deployed MetricStream to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of key assets through IT, vendor, cyber risk, and compliance assessments across all their business units. A large UK government agency has deployed MetricStream to manage IT risk and compliance end-to-end across hundreds of offices, keeping citizens' information safe and private. A leading telecommunications company is rolling out a cyber risk management program using risk quantification scoring based on multiple factors tied to business dollar impact. This score is used to prioritize remediation investments, to close gaps, to proactively address each potential risk. A global sports retailer has rolled out MetricStream IT risk and compliance to help them meet the huge challenge to lower risk and ensure proper governance across IT, security, and cyber controls. I'm sure many of the speakers today have their own stories to tell that will inspire us all. Have a great event, and thanks again for joining us. But, today's session is only one event. Please go to our website for upcoming events in our GRC Leadership Series. I'm looking forward to see you again soon. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Andy, for setting the stage for today. So we're going to kick things off now. We have an opening fireside chat on building cyber resilience and about thinking beyond cyber risk. So for this, I'd like to invite Philip Beniak, all the way from Australia. He's our managing director of our ANZ office, to moderate this session. Philip, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. It's exciting to be part of the GRC Summit series, focusing in on and building cyber resilience and actually even thinking beyond cyber risk. In all industries, enterprises operating in a very fast-moving, erratic environment. We all know that cyber risk identification and remediation really help protect enterprise value and enhance reputation. We not only see regulators, but actually even consumers' attitudes are changing fast. The velocity in which they can double down in terms of ferocity as well, in terms of reacting news in and around cyber breaches. Organizations need to be really building reputational equity. It's even far more important. Today, let's hear from a professional who actually lives in this world, an award-winning technical expert in cyber security, a lecturer and co-author of many cybersecurity books, a person that has put theory into practice as a CISO in a leading bank in the UAE. Please welcome Dr. Erdal Ozkaya, Regional CISO and Managing Director for Standard Chartered Bank in the UAE. Undoubtedly, the financial service sector is one of the most visible sectors on the forefront in and around cyber resilience. Just as the effects of COVID, whether people working from home, people movements, disruptions to supply chain, they're very much changing the way in the landscape that we actually really couldn't imagine even 6 months ago. Let's look at how organizations are making these changes to maintain their business operational, protecting customers, as well as really ensuring that they're prepared for such incidents. Dr. Erdal, I'd really like you to share with us what your thoughts are about the landscape and also how organizations should really prepare for this very much consistent onslaught of challenges.
Thank you for the introduction. As you said, our world is changing. Not just the economy, not just the weather, not just the user experiences, but also the humanity. As we all are aware, coronavirus forced us to change how we live, how we interact with friends. But coronavirus has also changed how we work as a result of how we interact with humans. Of course, as usual, hackers try to find the benefits for them, and they started to raise different attacks against us. While this is happening, we're trying to get adapted to the new normal, and this new normal is, as you said, changing the current cybersecurity landscape. So, what has changed with COVID? I'm pretty sure you all have noticed the frequency and impact of cyber attacks are increasing compared to earlier years. We have to find a way that it was not done as it before. An example, we used to wake up early in the morning, take our shower, have a breakfast maybe, get into a car or public transport, go to office, work from office, then come back, right? But at the moment, yes, we still wake maybe early up, take a shower, but we come into a room and work remotely. As many countries are still in lockdown, or we enforce, not me, the governments are enforcing the personal hygiene distances. As a result, things are changing. Now, what has changed, for example? The phishing attacks. Yes, phishing was always high. Phishing is usually always the first step of stepping any kind of attack. But now we see that all companies of all sizes, so regardless of an enterprise or a small business around the corner, they had to find a way to be productive, because to be in the business, they have to sell. They have to help their customers' demands. And this, of course, enforced remote workplace. What is the risk here? People are now connecting, if possible, from their enterprise desktop to their work. If not, with BYOD devices. If they have a secure home, is nice. Wi-Fi wireless at home, it's nice. But if not, what they have to do is they have to connect to a public Wi-Fi, sometimes from a coffee shop or through various channels, which can bring different risk. So, in the other side, as I said, attackers have ramped up phishing, ransomware. Why? Because this is the easiest way for them to reach out to us, to everyone, and hoping that we or someone is going to click on it. What else? We saw that ramp up on brute force attack or remote desktop protocols. Why? Many people now are connecting from the desktops remotely to their work environment. And if they don't do, like in COVID, we have to follow the basics, right? We have to have a mask, we have to keep social distance, we have to use hand sanitizers. Same thing applies to cybersecurity, Philip. So if you use, for example, your laptop to connect to the internet, any website you like, and at the same time use the same laptop to connect your corporate environment, you can carry risk. It's like you walk out without a mask in the shopping center, then come back home where you have other people with you, and then you not just get into the risk yourself, but if you get infected, you will bring this virus with you home. So same thing applies to the brute force and IDP attacks. People can use different attack vectors to reach into your organizations. VPN, yes. For me to be able to connect to my company, I have a corporate VPN, but we saw now hackers are trying to bypass this VPN or find vulnerabilities in this VPN providers. Which comes back to your question, like what has COVID changed? This is a great slide which I like, as you can see. Before 2020, COVID is not news. We always had COVID for animals, but if you look at the domains website registered, it was less than a few hundred. But today, as of not today, a few months ago, as of March 25, there were close to 100,000 COVID-related websites. As you can guess, most of them are used by hackers. How? We said ransomware. We said phishing. So scams grew up by 400%. Fake shopping sites has increased. Only Google by itself has blocked more than 18 million malware phishing emails related to coronavirus to their own services. So the cyber attacks are increasing and increasing. I hope this answered the question. I know I talk too much, but please feel free to interrupt me sometimes. Philip?
Yeah, so I think that really what we're talking, the situation is clear, and you pointed that out. I mean, we've got a tremendous avalanche of attack that's coming through our networks, and obviously with the working from home and all that sort of aspects has really changed that. But from an organizational standpoint, how do you manage this now? And obviously, how do you protect obviously the organization and protect the customer?
Great question. So first thing is I have to know what the attacks are, right? So I know phishing is increased. I know ransomware is an increase. I know brute force attacks are increased. I know there are different attack vectors. So let's take ransomware as example, which can be easily passed through an email or vulnerability. How is a ransomware attack happening? First of all, I'm pretty sure most of you know what a ransomware is. It is like I kidnap a child and I ask you to pay money, otherwise you will not see your child again. I'm pretty sure you saw this Hollywood movies, which people call said, hey, don't call the police. So ransomware is the same thing, but in computers. What they do is they either steal your data or encrypt your data in your computer and IoT devices, in your devices, and ask for money. What they do is they just, as you can see the little red screen on top, when you turn on your computer, it's going to ask you to pay some money in Bitcoin. Otherwise, you will not see your information again. It started all in 2016 with WannaCry. But there's many different ransomware which comes into the place and attacks us. Like for me, to be a good cyber defender, to protect our organizations and customers and shareholders, and I'm talking this generally, not just about the bank that I'm working for, we have to keep the confidentiality. We have to, everything confidential has to stay confidential. We have to ensure the integrity is same. So let's assume you have $100 in your bank account, and I'm pretty sure you want to see $100 when you go in your account as well. You wouldn't mind if you see $1 million, but you will definitely complain if you see even $99, right? So, and availability. So when you go, for example, to an ATM and plug your card, you want your money to be available. But can you imagine hackers break somehow through into the organization and block the services? I can give an example. Garmin, I'm pretty sure you have a smartwatch or GPS device from them. They had to pay recently, it's in the news by the way, more than, a couple of $1 million to release to get the ransomware key and release the data. Is Garmin the only one? No. Carlson Wagon Light Travel, the CWT, YM Breville Travel. There are many different organizations, unfortunately, were hit with the same attack. So what am I doing? I should have, now, what is ransomware doing? Ransomware is looking for vulnerabilities. How can I protect my infrastructure from vulnerabilities? Ensuring of being up to date. again, I want to go back to 2016 when first WannaCry hit. I was working for Microsoft, and back then many people blamed, me as representing Microsoft back then, saying, "Oh, Microsoft, it's your fault. You had the vulnerability." I'm like, hold on. Look, if anything which a human built will be not perfect. And yes, there could be some vulnerabilities, but when we look at WannaCry, for example, there was a exploit kit called Eternal Blue, which was using a vulnerability in the system, Windows systems, to raise the attack. So when Microsoft found out this exploit kit, they patched this with a update. And the first WannaCry attack didn't happen just 2 minutes or 2 hours or 2 days or 20 days later. It happened 2 months later. And I'm like, what have you done in this 2 months and not patch your computers? Please ensure you keep your systems up to date. When I say systems, I'm not just talking about Windows. This could be Linux. And there is a huge attack on Linux these days. Or your Apple, your Android phone, which is based on Linux. Or your firmware in your home router. Philip, you will remember there were a huge attack recently, a couple of years ago, not that recent, in Australia, based on this vulnerability in the firmware of the home Wi-Fi devices. So, can you imagine? You have all the security in your endpoint, which is your laptop, for example, in your phone, but you need to connect to the internet, and this happened through your home wireless router. And if this is vulnerable, what can you do? So ensure you're up to date. Make sure you have backups. Ensure you test your backups. Ensure you not just test backup and take them offline, because if you have online backup and you don't take different versions and it's connected to your system, unfortunately, this can be, which I've seen before, this can be also encrypted as well. Please try to build defense in depth strategy. We can talk about this in the upcoming minutes. As in COVID, please build a cyber hygiene. How? Ensure you have hard passwords. Ensure you have MFA. For example, you don't have to be the administrator in your laptop or in your desktop. Have the least privileges, because the cyber attacks are never going to end. I hope this answered the question.
And I think that's one of the things. I mean, and in recent years, there's been a lot of elements in and around, quantified risk assessments and having that really coming to the forefront. And as a thought leader and practitioner, what is your experience in operationalizing risk techniques, and really any recommendations for organizations and security leaders as to incorporate risk quantification within their processes? Do you have any thoughts in and around that?
Great question. As you mentioned at the beginning, I wrote many books. I trained many people worldwide on cybersecurity. I'm part-time lecturing students, and that's the first thing which I teach. Ladies and gentlemen, risk management is inbuilt to us as humans. You might wonder how, right? Like, get a baby, newborn baby. Try to, don't drop it off, please. It's like, try to make, as the baby is falling, you will see that the baby will hold your finger. Or now, if I do this, as a reflex, your eyes will close by instant. So risk management is built into us humans. So why not use this to go to the next level into cybersecurity? So I want to answer this question while looking what's happening globally. As I already mentioned, that phishing attacks, exploits, scammers are there, but there is also different ways of hackers are reaching out to us, right? For example, as I said, risk management. No, sorry, not risk management. This is the answer, risk management. Remote work. We saw huge spikes on people working remotely, as I said in the beginning. So if I know what the risks are for working remotely, okay, what is risk number one? People can use any kind of device to connect to my enterprise. So it's like you going to a shopping center now, if you are not in lockdown. What will they do is they usually will measure your fever. They will see if you have any symptoms of sickness. Hopefully, they will enforce you to wear a mask. This way, they will minimize the risk and they will ask you to keep a safe distance, right? Same things apply to this. If you can scan the traffic which is coming from your remote devices into your network, if you can have an environment where people cannot bring the dangers with them inside, this can help you to be more secure. I want to give some highlights by the industry. Like just looking, regardless of the industry, if you're in a food industry, healthcare industry, local government, we saw breaches happening in all of these. We see ransomware attacks in all of these. We saw remote attacks in all these industries. So what would I do? So again, many people are employing, working from home is great, but around 47% of the employees acknowledged failing to phishing scam while working from home. Based on Verizon, web application breach has doubled compared just to last year. Remote work, as we all know, is now in demand, but the average cost for this in case of an attack has increased as well. So, me knowing the statistics is important. Why? Because the best way to defend is, which I think we can talk later about as well, to know what the dangers is. Like, example, you want to go for fishing with your family. If you don't look at the weather forecast, you're doing a bad risk management. So risk management is definitely the key, which is going to help you to protect your organizations. If you create the cyber awareness program to your employees, your customers, you can minimize many attacks. Because what happens is, like you're at home, you're bored. What you do is usually you go online, and if you're unemployed, for example, you search in your iPhone, in your Google phone, or in your computer to some applications. Hackers know that. What they do is they use different ways to infect these applications. As I said, I just talked about Google, for example, but Zoom, for example. Many people started to connect to meetings online. What happened with Zoom, if you remember, hackers were able to flood this application, or like this is a public event, but could you imagine we're talking about company secrets? People were able to record this. So knowing the risk, having a proper risk assessment will help you to go to a better secure state. And when it comes to risk management, there are many different ways you can do risk assessments. There are many different standards like ISO 27005, for example, which is ISMS risk management. If you follow some of the standards, they will just give you the best practices, which will help you to be hopefully in a more secure site.
And with that, I think what is in the importance of quantification, really. So therefore, you can actually measure the elements in and around your risk profiles and understanding it more cohesively. And I think also that's the ability then to obviously escalate and actually talk to management that may not understand the challenges in and around risk in a more broader context. But just one other question I've got, Dr. Erdal, is enterprise automation and this whole element around automation, artificial intelligence are playing really a direct role within, or overall role within the cybersecurity program. What has been your thoughts in and around AI and automation in a cyber risk program?
Perfect. Like, I'll keep the slide open here, for example. Let's get, for example, from January 2020 to March 2020, there was an increase of 8.3% in mobile VPN usage. So, how can I know this, or how can I protect myself against it? So, I hope your organization has some sort of SOC, Security Operations Center, which monitors the incoming traffic, the outgoing traffic, and notifies you or takes action against it if they see something bad is happening. So if let's assume, my family, let's say my brother or my wife, my child is sick, has corona at home, but I have to work because SOC is 24/7 work, or I'm an analyst who's sitting, who has some feeling bad. So what happens is, there's millions of logs depending on the organization size. If you just miss one of this can cause an issue. Where I believe AI can help. So for me, AI will eliminate all the bad stuff of humanity and can help, maybe help us to human version 2.0. Why? Because as I said, me as a human, I can be tired, I can be having a bad day, I can be having an accident, and miss one little line in a scene, for example, where an AI hopefully can detect this and bring this in front of me, even if I miss it. Another example, let me tell you a different way. I'm pretty sure you all watched the movie Terminator, where Arnold Schwarzenegger in the first series was sent to the future, to the past, to kill who is going to stop the robot war. So, and this kid, many of us saying, "Oh my God, is AI going to take all us?" And I can give even a better example. Microsoft had a great software which is totally AI based, which was tweeting, and it was learning based on machine learning algorithms. Hackers or some people found the bug, and they started to teach that AI algorithm bad stuff, swear words. I don't want to mention the words here, but some words which can be harassed for different kinds of humans. I mean, based on color, based on race. When I say kind of humans, of course, we're all the same kind. Please don't get me wrong. Like me being, you notice probably from my accent, I was born and grew up in Germany, but my parents are Turkish, but I live in Australia. I mean, I'm a proud Aussie, but I live in Dubai. All this can be bullied, right? But hackers found a way to bully that algorithm. But I'm saying, like in everything, the medallion has two sides. We should definitely get the good side of AI, and I believe AI is going to help us with help of automation, by the way. Why? Because like at the moment, for me to scan 10,000 applications with a small group of employees, it's nearly impossible. But if I use the right AI or automation partner, which does this for me and brings it in front of me, will just save lots of time to me. But many people are asking also, like, Erdal, AI, are you not aware if it's going to take your jobs away? I'm like, do you remember when cloud came first? People were afraid that cloud is going to take the jobs away. Yes, some jobs were eliminated, but it didn't come out of sudden, right? It comes step by step, and you had the opportunity to improve yourself, your skill set, to go to the next level. It didn't come like Corona, where unfortunately within a few months the whole world was in shutdown mode. Millions of people, like, you couldn't foresee it, maybe, but you can foresee what AI, you can foresee how AI is coming and how you can utilize your skill set to adopt AI to survive and increase yourself, you educate yourself to work with the latest technology. I hope this answered the question.
It's really a fundamental approach that really will give that added value. As you say, you can miss things, oversight. It's a human trait, and actually having that capability. But I think you also touched on the elements in and around ensuring that you have those people actually overlooking and making sure that AI and the algorithms that are built are actually really doing their job and they're fit for purpose as well. But just on that, I know we're coming short of time here, so I just wanted to just one or two takeaways from that you would give to CISOs that are actually listening today that really want to, in essence, understand the challenges in and around elements around the COVID situation. But what would you share with them, just as a final summary?
Thank you. All right. I see rise of social engineering as well. What is social engineering? The art of human deception. What they do is, they know people are working from home. What hackers do is they try to give fake messages, hopes to people where can click. So please be aware of social engineering. Be aware what's happening in the world. We see major cyber attacks around the globe. I can give. You can see it in the slide in front of you. There is no company at the moment. I think James Comey said it. There is two types of organizations. One, they know they've been hacked. Two, they don't. So seeing all the statistics shouldn't scare you. You should be ready to anything and everything every time. Like humans, right? We were able to adapt to COVID situation and continue to live as much as possible. Is this the first pandemic? No. I hope it will be the last. But we should be able to learn. For example, we see that cyber attacks are increasing and the cost is getting higher and higher. So why not build a proper defense mechanism? Why not understand how hackers work? Why not utilize, we all know what is new, but why not go 2,500 years back? Sun Tzu, as you can see, he wrote a book called The Art of War, and he said, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you don't have to be fearing of anything. Now, if you know your hackers, before that, if you know yourself, your systems, what kinds of connections you have, and keep an eye in the landscape of what's happening in the world, you learn about the hackers, you should be able to defend against them. Don't forget, hackers, they're not people from the moon. They use similar technologies, they have some goals, believe it or not, they have some budgets. Yes, they might be better in some stuff than you, but they have some skill set which is not unlimited, right? At the end, they're performing a job. The difference, it's important for CISOs or for security tech or for anybody to understand that the attacker has the attacker has to find only one attack vector to be successful. While we as defenders, we have to defend anything and everything. If you work in an organization like mine, which we have like 100,000 employees, thousands of machine service, or not just my organization, many different organizations. So you have to defend about everything. But don't forget, the attacker has to do everything right, while you have to detect only one part of the attack. This comes back to what you said, like AI, for example, automation. Yes, you will still need your great SOC analyst, but giving the right tool will make this SOC analyst even better. So you should practice thinking like an attacker. Please have a glasses, virtual glasses, which is not feasible. For every system you interact, try to think how it can be hacked and try to defend it before even others do. Have a proper cyber security strategy which is based on risk management. Have a long-term plan for your security investments. Please invest on your talents. And when I say talents, this not just includes your cybersecurity professionals, this also includes your cyber awareness team. Don't forget, maybe you as CISO are responsible from cybersecurity, but everybody in the organizations, from third party to contractors, is responsible to provide security end to end, help you. And this is your job to put this in their mind. And I keep this saying all the time, be ready. It's not about if it's going to happen, it's about when the attack is going to happen. So your cyber security strategy should have one single goal. Don't try to make as secure as possible. Try to create as secure as necessary. Because, look, I get this question a lot. Like, we have like 50 software which protect us from recent attack type. I'm like, thank you. But why having 50 of the same kind? Try to protect the riskiest areas and, build a defense in depth which you can utilize this. So having the latest technology always not gonna put you it's not going to always make it more secure. Remember, I just talked about social engineering. Let's say, Phil, if I ask you for your password, will you give it to me now? What is your password to connect to this system, for example? All right, let's say I have a child right now here, and I got a gun in my hand, and this is a video call saying, Philip, you either give me your password or you will not see your child again. So having a proper strategy. Exactly.
But, yeah, what you're saying is correct. I mean, it really needs to be managed in a very comprehensive manner. Ensuring, as you said, invest in the infrastructure, invest in the capability, invest in the people that can help.
Exactly.
And with that investment, it may not make you 100%, but it's going to make you a lot better off if systems are compromised or challenged. So, Dr. Erdal, I really appreciate your time. I know that it's been very interesting listening to you and understanding your views. And thank you for helping us here. And I would like to pass back to Peter for the next series. Thank you.
Thank you. This is my contact details for everybody who's watching this to keep in touch. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you, GRC Summit, for bringing us together. I'm looking forward to stay in touch. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Erdal. Thank you, Philip, for such a great opening session. Much, much appreciated. Okay, so hopefully on your screens very shortly, you will see the first polling questions. For those return guests, we love to get the information from the polls and really understand what the pulse of the day is. So please take some time and fill out the polling questions when they appear on the screen. Okay, so next up, we have a first panel discussion. This panel is quantifying IT and cyber risks in business terms. And the genesis for this really is that the gap between what CISOs tell their management and what is understood is sort of at an all-time high. And surveys tell us that communication challenges have figured in the top 3 issues facing CISOs today. So translating the impact of cyber incidents into financial loss and other types of damage is of utmost importance. This model, which we'll talk about right now, helps organizations define their IT and cyber programs and prioritize those mitigation investments. So right now, I'd like to invite Rohit Bedi, MetricStream's Executive Vice President for the Americas, to moderate this session. Rohit, over to you.
Welcome. My name is Rohit Bedi. I'm part of the MetricStream leadership. And I want to welcome our audience to a very important topic that we'll be taking up in a minute on our panel, which is about quantifying IT and cyber risks in business terms. Very warm welcome to our audience around the world. Morning hours on the Pacific Coast. Good afternoon to our Central Coast and our East Coast and our European colleagues, and a very good evening to our guests from Asia and beyond. With me today are 2 very important, very luminary, very known members in the industry who've done remarkable things in this area in their careers and in their present journeys at their companies. Let me take the opportunity to introduce to you Diego Souza. Diego is the Deputy Global Chief Information Security Officer at Cummins. Diego has served in similar roles at United Airlines, and he's also played the roles at GE Oil and Gas. Diego, welcome.
Thank you, Holgate, for inviting me here. So I'm very glad to participate and hope we have a great discussion today.
Thank you, Diego. Let me now take the opportunity to introduce to you Manish Tiwari. Manish is very well known in the industry, specifically in his region, but not just in his region, globally. Manish is the Senior Vice President and the Global Information Security Officer for Bharti Airtel. In his past, Manish obviously has a long-standing career at Bharti Airtel, but in particular, what I want to mention to the audience is he's served in some very critical roles in information security. He's been with the Indian Navy for a number of years, and he's also served as the Chief Information Security Advisor for Microsoft Corporation. Manish, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Rohit. It's my privilege to be part of this discussion today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Manish. Diego, let me start with you. Very important topic about quantifying cyber risk. And the topic that I want to start with you is to ask you, when you're presenting cyber risks, cyber IT is the world of ones and zeros. You know, it's a black white kind of world. Businesses is a lot of different sort of, 1-0 with a lot of different gray areas. My straightforward question to start with this topic is, in your capacity as an executive, how do you, overcome the challenge of presenting cyber risk in business terms to an executive audience, to a board level audience, that they can understand the gravity and they can understand what to do?
Thank you, Rohit. This is a great question, actually. I would say it's not presenting the cyber risks. I would say it's presenting the business risks, right? So I think cyber today is embedded into the core of the business. So making sure you understand the business operations and how it works, and then convert that into a language that's possible for the board to understand. So I also believe that the CISO role today, it's a bridge between the technology aspect as well as the business side. So you need to understand both sides. So I need to be able to understand the risk on the cybersecurity side and translate into business language for my CFO when I'm talking about like financial impact, how those cyber risks converts into financial impact, branding, or when I'm talking to my CTO, when I have to convert a cyber risk into operation impact. So I need to have that ability. However, I also understand I need to have the inverse. I need to have the capability to understand the business goals and the business model and convert back into cyber language for my organization so they can understand what needs to be deployed, implemented in order to achieve those goals. So I think today is cyber is enabling business. So being able to convert that cyber risk into business language is critical and core for the success of any CISO in an organization.
Let me pick up from the core need that you talked about, Diego. Let me ask Manish. Manish, if you sort of kind of continue that thought, what would you advise to your peers, executive peers, in what does it take to align the IT and cyber priorities with the business goals? What would you advise your peers that they must do?
So I agree with Diego. It's actually very important to be able to translate IT security risks into business risks. But equally important, firstly, I think it's very important for the CISO, and particularly those who have not really spent too much time in the organization, because the transition in the industry is a fairly common occurrence. Is that it's extremely important to understand the ecosystem, understand the environment, spend a lot of time understanding the business. Unfortunately, in my community, we understand cyber risks, we understand the cyber threat part, we understand the technical aspects of cyber risks extremely well. But at times where we fail is that we don't put enough time and energy into understanding the business of the organization. Because if you don't understand the business of the organization, then you will not be able to find the right balance. And a critical activity that a CISO drives, particularly in organizations where audit, compliance, risk management, as well as cyber operations are all part of the CISO's functions, as it is in my case. This whole process of risk management is important because this is the exercise which actually helps you find the right balance between between IT security controls and application of technologies with respect to business requirements. So I think that I would say is extremely important.
Thank you, Manish. So Diego, Manish summarized it, in terms of understanding the business, having, and using this as that important bridge to bring sort of parties together. And the risk is that, is that bridge. Let me just ask you just a quick follow-on question on that. Do you feel that the IT cyber domain has something to learn from the operational side of, the operational domain, the operational risk? Operational risk elements, enterprise risk elements have been there for the longest period of time. And people in those positions have generally been able to, present risk, talk about risk, some quantification. But the need of the hour is on the cyber and IT side. Do you feel like there's something to learn from the other side as well?
No, definitely. Piggyback here on Manish's comment, right? Really understand the business side is important, but not only to translate to the business language, the cyber risk, but also to see opportunities to learn. So I had the pleasure to work in different manufacturing organizations, and what is very common on this type of organizations, the lean manufacturing, right? So making sure you can speed the production and keep the quality. So in my organization, I try to apply the same methodology. So how can I increase the cybersecurity, making things faster to support the business need and the business goal, at the same time not impacting the quality of the security service I'm providing? So definitely there are opportunities we can leverage in learning from the business operation side that we can apply within the cyber organization.
So we went from sort of starting with, overcoming the challenge of presenting cyber risks in a manner that the executives or the important stakeholders inside the company can understand, and how do you kind of do that? We talked to Manish about, what's that advice, that nuggets that he would have for his peers on how to kind of put that sort of bridge together, how to harmonize it. What's the most important thing you got to understand? He said, you have to understand the business very well, right? That's when you layer on the risk on top of that. And then Diego kind of supported that with saying, what can we learn from what has happened on the sort of the operational side of it, and how we can apply that. Let me keep going here. And for our audience that is joining us, some of them are pretty knee-deep into cybersecurity. Some of them are supporting it, and some of them are important stakeholders and executives in the company that are trying to understand that. So let me start with a very simple question. I'd like to pose that to Manish. Manish, let's take a process. Let's take the payment transaction. It's one of the most common things that's happening in the world, right? And a payment process, and you're at one of the biggest telcos, not in the region, in the world. A payment process can go through myriad number of activities. It has a lot of touch points. How would you sort of look at that process and say, well, here's a process that's going to touch so many different elements. So how do you look at the risk of that process? Is it just in the databases? Is it in the processes? Is it in the transactions? Is it in third parties? How many different things does a CISO team have to take a look at? Let's say that we are taking a look at the payment transaction. I just want to take example for the audience.
So Rohit, these are these are not decisions which are taken unilaterally or only by, let's say, one of the CXOs. There are multiple touch points even within the organization. And I think three critical pillars into which I can divide this is, one, of course, is ease of use. The other is, how efficient is the process that's been established. So efficiency of the process, ease of use of the entire process and the journey that you have set up for the customer. and IT risk management from both ends, at the customer end as well as at the company end. And of course, for online payment transactions, we have a lot of industry standards, including if you're facilitating online card payments, you have PCI DSS and a lot of other stuff. But I would say largely these are the three categories that one would. Now, for example, the payments part, you will have the finance team involved very deeply. From the ease or the customer journey, you'll have the customer experience team involved. You'll have the IT, the IT operations team involved, and you'll also have the IT security team involved. And these teams cannot work in isolation; they have to actually work together. The IT security team also has to take, as part of its IT risk management strategy, also has to look at various use cases and possible scenarios of fraud, particularly for financial transactions, situations of fraud which could happen at the company end in case adequate risk management controls and processes are not implemented. And of course, you have to look at it even from the customer's angle. That ease of use should not be at the cost of putting the customer to additional risk. And I think this is the kind of balance that has to be struck when coming up with any new processes. And let me just sum this up by saying that this is a constantly shifting goalpost. So it's a continuous journey. You have to continuously keep looking at it. You get a lot of feedback from the field, from your own teams, from customers. There could be a situation where some customer experiences fraud. So you have to look at what exactly happened, and is there anything that you can do to improve security even from a customer's perspective at the customer's end. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, Manish. Thank you so much for that. That's one of the most, I have to say, one of the, you summarized it in just literally a few minutes here. One of the best summaries that I've heard. And what Manish talked about for our audience is the balance between the ease of use, which is very easy to kind of pick it up and always focus on that, but the balancing that with the risk and security for the client, and making sure that those three pillars, the risk, security, and the ease of use, are well balanced, is a very important topic. Let me pick that topic and extend it a little bit. And Diego, I want to ask about an area that is becoming important, which is third party. In any company, in any process now, the world that we live in, the ecosystems that we live in, both personally, professionally, there's just an incredible amount of a third-party ecosystem. Therefore, for you, in your position and Manish's position, there's the element of third-party risk. It's not just what you're doing or what your company is doing or your processes, but what your third parties are doing, and then their end processes, their risks. I guess the question here is, somebody in your position, how do you look at the risks of that, and how do you manage that in a way that you can have a handle on it, knowing that you can't control everything, but you got to have a handle on it, and you can't let it affect your company. So how do you have a handle on it if you come to third-party risk?
No, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I think so. In this world, I think you won't find any company that does everything. They're gonna have to rely on core partners, right? So third parties, sometimes even fourth parties, that will deploy pieces and parts of their core product. As we see customer challenging us to make sure when we are developing our own products, we have security in place, right? Security in place, make product secure as part of that. We need to also challenge our vendors, right? Our partners to elevate their cybersecurity. I think you can have the most robust cybersecurity organization with all the fancy technologies in place, but if you're not paying attention in the single channel that you have with a third party that maybe is not at the same level of security you are, that will become your weak link in your organization. So there are many ways you can do that. So you can do that through contract requirements. So that's, I think, one of the first things, making sure you including cybersecurity requirements into your contract with your third party. Make sure they are accountable for protecting the data, protecting the environment as they are dealing with you. So you can use third parties as well to perform audits, external audits on those vendors to ensure and evaluate the cybersecurity level of that organization. But it's important to have your own cybersecurity organization for third-party management, right? So to make the ecosystem fluid. So making sure you have clear criteria that you can use to measure the security of your vendors. And even before making a connection, sharing information, you evaluate what is the level of protection they have in place. Because again, you can have the best secure solution in place, but if your vendors, your partners are not at the same level, they can become the weak link in your organization. So making sure your organization does manage vendor properly is important from a contract level to a security level to an audit level. So those are, I think, the three pillars I would include here in this management.
Thank you, Diego. Very, very, very sort of targeted advice. And Diego talked about extending the organization, his own into the third party, using sort of vehicles, whether it's contracts or it is education or whatever, in terms of making sure that the priorities are well understood to the sort of the larger sort of ecosystem. And then he summarized it with the three pillars that he sort of talked about. And that this is my view, solid sort of best practice type of model that sort of Diego's talked about. I want to segue that, we're on this topic of ecosystem, and I want to segue into some newer technologies that are available in the world. The world is talking about. I'm pretty sure it's part of your corridors inside your company as well. I'm going to come to Manish here. Manish, we are going into the world of soon into artificial intelligence, into robotics process automation, natural language processing. Let's just keep it there. I guess what I want to ask you is, we know what the advantages are. So I'll place the following for you. We know that we can use robotic process automation, complete automation to do massive amounts of data analysis. But I guess the question for you is, from your vantage point, where do you see the human intervention that needs to be placed appropriately? And then how can we use artificial intelligence in the right way on this topic of cyber risk and the ability to sort of quantify that?
So Rohit, actually, I'd like to continue where Diego had left on, because it's linked to my answer on how do traditional operations, and what is it that we can learn from that. If you talk about traditional operations or business operations or anything, even if you talk about basic manufacturing, there is a tremendous amount of history and development from people, process, technology that has gone into it. So whenever a business decision has to be taken, you see a huge amount of study that is done, data which is correlated. And today you have a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning that's being applied to help decision making with respect to business. In the field of IT security, this is also catching up, but I guess we are still not there. So we have a very mature organization would have a large number of security or technology solutions in place. And I think one of the areas that we still need to refine and really improve upon is the correlation part. How do we correlate data? Yes, there are solutions which are there. You have new generation SIMs now, or rather threat intelligence based systems which help correlate and orchestrate data, but we are still not there. So I would say that taking a huge amount of data, the huge amount of threat intelligence, we have still not reached the desired level of maturity. The other thing that I'd like to point out is that there are a lot of aspects of cybersecurity which I would say still require the human, the human mind when it comes to threat hunting, when it comes to specifically analyzing incidents or looking for some new generation, APT level attacks. So I would say in the field of cybersecurity, the human angle is far from being replaced. We are a long way off. But you touched upon a very interesting term, process automation, RPAs as the industry refers to them. So there is another misnomer that where everything is classified as artificial intelligence. A large amount of optimization of security operations that is happening today, including what we have done in my organization, where we have gone the AI way in a very big way, is that a large number of the large number of processes related to cybersecurity are a simple process automation technique. So there is no machine learning per se that needs to be applied to that. There is a set scenario which requires you to react in a very predictable manner, and all you need to do is then create playbooks. And if you have a great an ITSM tool, you can basically automate a large portion of your security operations, right from incident detection to sort of mitigation. But the holy grail still remains the machine learning part, where you analyze a large amount of data. And I would say that we are getting there, but we are still not there. So to sum it up, I would say the human angle in cybersecurity operations still remains a very, very critical factor. I would not blindly go by any solution which takes the human angle out for now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Manish. Diego, let me ask you to comment on that. Maybe Manish sort of talked about the importance of the human element still, the power of simple automation, the need for what we can extract from AI, but still ways to go. What is your thought process or your thinking or your observations on the place for robotic process automation and how that plays an advantage, the place for artificial intelligence, and the appropriate place for human intervention? How do those three things kind of come together? What would be the most potent formula for a corporation?
That's a very interesting point, and I agree with Manish comments. I think when we talk about AI, it goes back to that quote, right? Who watched the watcher, right? Is who audited the auditor. So we are relying more and more in AI to make decisions, right? It's the aggregation of data that we are pulling from different sources, putting on a data lake, and we have these analytics tools running on top of that using AI and machine learning capabilities to make decision. I think the automation piece of that is very welcome into the cybersecurity aspect, because as Manish touched a little bit, the correlation is getting there, but we still have a gap in understanding the ecosystem and think about the environment today. So what is the environment? What is the infrastructure today? So your infrastructure is just expanding. So it's not only about your firewalls anymore. It's like where your data flows, is where your identity flows, right? So identity and data are the new perimeter. So using AI capabilities to understand the flow, right? Robotics process to gather data, process, and then correlate that information will be a critical part of the future of cybersecurity. So, and business are moving also towards to that in their day-to-day operations, right? So how they can simplify and make things faster using automation. But cyber needs to play on top of that, making sure the integrity of the automation is in place. So making sure there is no violation of the data that could lead to a bad decision to the business.
Thank you for sharing that. So, from Manish's comments on the different places and the importance of human intervention while utilizing some of the new technologies, to a very powerful statement from Diego, who is going to watch the watcher. Couldn't have said it any better. Let me pick it up from there, and Diego, let me keep you on the podium here. And And I'm going to pick up from something that Manish said earlier, which is, different things kind of coming into our world, right? We talk about third party. We talk about third party. We talked about AI. So this topic of different things and important things, blockchain. Let's pick up on that. Blockchain in different industries, both yours, Diego, and Manish, and various other industries, is an important topic. Blockchain brings an element of efficiency, it brings an element of efficacy, it brings an element of speed. But blockchain brings risks to both you gentlemen. So the question for you is, while we are embarking on adopting these things, how would, you're sitting there as one of the most senior most executives on information security, you're trying to quantify it, and you got to use it. How do you kind of look at that? And how do you look at the risk of that and the ability to quantify it?
Yeah, blockchain is a very interesting technology. And to be honest, we are hearing about blockchain for the last 5 years, right? So, and I think the technology is evolving. It definitely will bring a lot of value, not only from a business perspective, when you can do transactions cheaper and more secure, but also there are use cases where we can use blockchain for passwordless approach, right? For authentication, data privacy and data protection is there. I think the challenge per se is not really on the blockchain technology, right? Will be around the usage of the blockchain. So we're going to have to continue to rely on softwares that will use the technology to process, right? Flaws on those codes will be leveraged for cyber attacks. We're going to continue to rely on endpoints, right? Where you're going to have the interface between the end users and the blockchain to decrypt the information, right? In some point, another point where we have to take action. And also, blockchain rely a lot on the asymmetric platform for private and public keys. Key management will be a critical element of that. And if I would add one thing else here, would be the regulation, right? It's very deregulated today. There is no specific regulation for usage of blockchain. I think as we see more governments and more countries, more companies getting into the blockchain usage, we may have some regulations coming up. But then the challenge will be how that regulation will apply across the board, right? So different country, different regulations. So I think that's going to be one of the challenges for me on the blockchain usage going forward. Not per se on the technology, but the usage around the technology.
Okay. Manish, wanted to pick up on Diego and just ask you to comment, maybe a quick comment on this, but I'll pose a specific question in there. So Diego talked about, managing the need for, or the thought process on regulation of this blockchain. Yes, it's important, but we got to think about it. Let me ask you a specific question. Blockchain, the data is fleeting. It's moving from one point to the other point to the other point to the other point. You control one point. You can put all kinds of stuff to quantify the risk in there. But this is a ball that is being kicked from one foot to the other, to the other, to the other, and yet you've got to manage the risk on your side. How do you propose doing that, and what's your advice to your peers?
I actually agree with what Diego has said completely, 100%. The technology is evolving, and it's not so much as an issue with blockchain as a technology, as what needs to be seen as to how it's going to be implemented. Blockchain, these are technologies which are helping run, have helped run cryptocurrencies in a very big way, which have become big money spinners. And we have had very, very serious incidents in the recent past where a large amount of investor money has been siphoned off because of issues, either at the, some compromise at an exchange and so on and so forth. So what I would like to caution, whether my peers or people in general, is that I think we got to be very careful before we pitch any technology as the absolute godsend solution to all problems. Every technology has its pros, its cons. Every technology has its limitations. Every technology has its shelf life. and every technology will have weak links, and that's extremely important. And last but not the least, at the back end, the technology is fairly complicated. But what eventually, if you have to, massify this, it has to be implemented in a manner where you again don't forget the ease of use for the end customer, where for him it is oblivious, the core technology that is going in the back end, and and that's about it. Because if it is, because the strength of the chain is that of its weakest link, and hence I don't think it's correct to espouse any solution as the perfect solution for all of humanity's problems, or of all cybersecurity problems, because there is no perfect solution.
Manish and Diego, thank you for both your comments on this very important topic. And as you can see, for our audience, in the limited time we have with our very esteemed audience, we want to be able to pick up some very important subtopics that are part of this quantification in cyber, because these are topics that are hitting the corridors of corporations, and not just in Diego and Manish's role and their comments. And both of them have sort of talked about kind of how to look at these technologies as not just a one size fits all model, and it's just very refreshing. Oftentimes information security executives are deemed as people who are just taking care of information security. So it's just extremely refreshing when a global CISO like Manish or Diego talks about over and over the focus on the customer and what does it do to the customer. So that's very refreshing. What I want to do now is I want to maybe ask a couple of questions from that we've posed from the audience. There's a number of questions. We'll have time for one or two, and I'll combine something, and then I want to go to some final thoughts from our panelists as well. And I'd like to pose a very critical executive question to both of them. But before that, let me ask a question. And Manish, let me keep it with you. I'm going to just give you two things. One that I wanted to ask, and one the audience is asking. The audience wanted to pose this question to you. They said, "Well, in your department, whether it's tens or hundreds of people, they're all like cybersecurity professionals, right? The technical whiz guys and men and women. How do you embed the business speak sort of in that department?" So I'm going to give you that part A, but I'm going to pose the part B to you. The part B is, well, that's your department. But you're not just looking at them, you're also looking at a bunch of your colleagues who are also sitting in significant positions. And let's say there's a difference of opinion. How do you bring them together? So if you can just take a couple of minutes, maybe share that with us.
Sure. On the first question, I think it starts by choosing the right people. You have to set up the right team. You have to set up people who are open to learning, areas of either technology or of the company business, which is not usually their area of expertise. As you said, I mean, they may be whiz-kids, but IT security depends eventually because of the business. If there is no business requirement, then there are no information systems, and if there are no information systems, then there is no information to protect. And I think that is the key fundamental. Are we part of the solution or are we part of the problem? And we have to be part of the solution in case we have to survive. Because if we can't speak businesses, the business language when it is required, or speak technical language when it is required, we would fail, woefully. So right from the time when people join the organization, they spend. We have processes and procedures, starting from AppSec to security operations, every aspect of security. This whole aspect of the approach and culture is that how do we constantly basically get the business and the IT, including the IT risk management team, which is part of IT operations, the CIO group. How do we basically embed them to the extent possible? And that typically happens, when there's a new product launch or there's an AppSec issue. Some updates have to be done. That's the time when all the stakeholders get together, get into a huddle, and everybody is encouraged to listen. I think the important thing is listen. If you don't listen, then you don't learn. So that's my answer to the first part of the question. Okay. Your second question, Rohit. Sorry, your second question was difference of opinion. I think solving a problem starts by listening to the other people's viewpoints and opinions. So if you don't listen, then you don't understand the other person's viewpoints, and there are always differences of opinion. So, and I won't even call it conflict resolution or conflict management. I would rather call it how do you bridge the gap, and that entire piece is again part of the risk management strategy, because eventually if there is a risk and it becomes a residual risk, eventually you have somebody has to have a sign off in the organization for that risk. So and hence you cannot do effective risk management without the involvement of business. And I think that is the critical yes, that is the critical recipe, the magic recipe for eventually bringing everybody onto the table and eventually ensuring that nobody leaves the room till the time there is a resolution and at least some common viewpoint. Yeah.
Awesome. Manish, I could pick up a lot of nuggets in there, but in the time we have, and before I thank both of you, I'd like to ask just a headline answer, and allow me to just ask you to maybe just give us a very summarized two-line view. And here's a personal critical question I want to ask both of you gentlemen in your executive positions. Your CISOs, you have the ability to affect the game of your company. How does a person in your position go from just running business as usual or the expectation of, just take care of the security to changing the game for your company, the competitive game for your company, so that your company is that number one leader in that industry? Maybe just a headline answer. Diego, let me start with you and then move quickly to Manish before we end the panel.
I think first of all, you need to understand that security now is a business enabler, right? We are not a supportive function anymore. We are helping the business to enable capabilities, either through your product development with security in place or be able to provide service in open, business in different regions. So I think the mindset, if you want to be part of that transformation of the business, you need to make sure you understand the security now is a business enabler and not a support function anymore.
Awesome. And Manish?
I would say 1/3 of the country basically is our customer, and I'm talking about individual retail, individual customers. So the first and foremost I would basically do is, what is it that aligns with my expertise, and at the same time it can be a business opportunity, and thirdly it can solve the problem for millions of my retail customers at a great cost. Is there something from the point of view of cyber risk management that I can do? And I can work with my business team and get the best minds together in the company to take and solve the my retail customers, millions of customers to whom I'm directly connected, and help them, either secure their devices or manage their individual risks, because and at a great cost. Because today, and particularly Rohit, as and as everybody is aware, COVID crisis, this pandemic, has made the digital world even more powerful. We are doing everything online, even more so than we were before. And hence the risks, not only to organizations, but more importantly to individuals, have increased. I think that is what I would do, in addition to what Diego has said.
Thank you, both of you. Two guests that are, to use Diego's language, are in driving seat in their Formula One cars. And to use Manish's language, the intense focus that he has reflected on the customer, and basically summarizing and saying, I have the power to connect with the client. I want to thank both of you. I want to thank the audience from around the world. Let's do it again on this very important topic about quantifying IT and cyber risk in business terms and how it creates a competitive impact on the company. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Diego, Manish, and Rohit, for sharing your insights on such a pertinent topic. Okay, so there should be another polling question appearing on your screens momentarily, so please take that when you have a chance. And now we're going to take a very quick break. It's 10:55 Eastern. We're going to be back in 5 minutes at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific to continue. So please be back in 5 minutes for the next session. Thanks so much. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a quick, enjoyed your quick break. So next up, fireside chat on achieving cyber resilience with automation and risk quantification. That stands to be, I think, a super interesting session. So, and obviously the synopsis for this session is, being resilient requires enterprise leaders to recognize the need for harmonization in their IT, cyber, and business continuity units. By promoting a continual strategic interplay, cyber resilience ensures your organization is adaptable for the inevitable incidents, attacks, and crises. So to get us started, I want to welcome Jonathan Curtis, Director in the American Field Sales Organization for MetricStream, and he'll be moderating this session. Jonathan, over to you.
So Peter, thanks. I'm Jonathan Curtis. I manage MetricStream's GRC solution practice that's focused on healthcare and life sciences. And for a fireside chat today, I've got a great guest. I want to introduce MK Palmore. He is the Field Chief Security Officer for Palo Alto Networks. His responsibilities at Palo Alto Networks include support of strategic accounts and continuing to provide thought leadership in the cybersecurity area. Part of joining Palo Alto Networks, MK serves as the head of the cybersecurity branch for the FBI in San Francisco, capping a career of public service that spanned 32 years. His leadership and investigative experiences while at the FBI included cybersecurity, crisis response management, risk management advisory services, and counterterrorism investigations. MK's cybersecurity certifications include the CISM, CISSP, GCCC, and the Carnegie Mellon University CISO certification. He earned a Bachelor of Science from the United States Naval Academy and an MBA from Pepperdine. MK began his professional career as an officer with the United States Marine Corps. MK, welcome to the Fireside Chat.
Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate being on. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your service. My family's a military family as well, and we definitely appreciate sacrifices you made for all of us. MK, I want to start out the conversation today by focusing on, as Peter had mentioned in the introduction, certain types of cyber incidents that are bound to happen at some point in time, either denial of service attacks, internal identity spoofs, or data breaches. I mean, it's only a matter of time. I'm curious how you prepare for such incidents while maintaining operations as usual for other parts of the business.
Yeah, so Jonathan, you really kind of hit the nail on the head as you illuminated parts of my background. So my experience, of course, with the FBI was dealing with a lot of adversarial activity, and I think it makes you wary, but it also makes you aware as to why we're all in this business of defending enterprises. It's because adversaries out there are engaged in constant and persistent activity, trying to gain access to networks and environments so that they can get in, exfiltrate data, and of course make money off of those illegal transactions. So, how you prepare for it really are the use of best practices and frameworks that are available to all of us in the cybersecurity industry, and of course the identification of best in breed and excellent tools that will enable your enterprise to enable the business and at the same time protect you moving forward. So there's a ton of work, of course, that goes into it. I like to break it down into sort of a mathematical equation, right? I look at it as investment in practice, GRC, tools, everything else that you can stack on the left-hand side that amounts to preparation for an event, quite frankly, that you hope will never happen, but we all know just by the math and by the weekly notices of breaches that these things do happen. And so in an effort to remain resilient, the idea is to make heavy investment on the left-hand side of the equation, doing those things, again, across best practices, using frameworks that are available to practitioners in order to prepare your enterprise for what might happen someday. And the more you invest on the left-hand side of the equation, the better your mitigation is on the right-hand side when you're forced to react to these events.
Well, MK, that brings up a point about, how do you prepare for these events? And one of the things that we're having a lot of conversations at MetricStream with our clients about is quantified risk assessment methodologies. And these have been on the horizon for a while now, and they're becoming more and more possible to practically implement. I guess what I want to ask you is, what has been your experience in operationalizing some of these methodologies, and how do you take these numbers focused, numbers-driven risk analysis techniques and make them practical?
Yeah, so that's a great question. When we're talking about risk, we're talking about the probability of an event happening across a spectrum of events and the kind of impact that it might have on your enterprise and organization. And quite frankly, I have found over the years that these developing methods in risk analysis are very helpful in terms of explaining the dangers or sort of quantifying the challenge that we face as an enterprise when speaking to your colleagues who are outside of InfoSec. And also in those important briefings to the boards of directors where it's important to relay and quantify the risk associated with what you're trying to accomplish in terms of enterprise defense. People understand math, right? If you can quantify a number and give it a relational context, 28 out of 100, 50 out of 100, if you can put some kind of quantification on it, and then people really understand where you are in terms of the depth of the program and maturity of the program, it makes it easier then to have conversations about what you need to do in the context of these frameworks that are available in order to level up the capabilities of the enterprise. One of the things that InfoSec suffered from in the early days was this lack of quantification, right? First of all, the terminology, just the experience of InfoSec wasn't clear to all of those who were impacted by it. We also suffered from the fact that InfoSec was not evaluated and considered an enterprise risk the way it is nowadays, at least I hope, across the board. And you had a challenge. You had to explain to non-technical people who held the budgets how it is that you intended to protect the enterprise. As we all know, the activities of adversaries began to increase exponentially. The conversation shifted and changed, and now we're to a point, again, I hope, where most enterprises view cybersecurity as an enterprise risk. In other words, it's racked and stacked along with every other risk that the enterprise might experience. And certainly in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis, we're starting to understand that our technology really is at the core of business operations now. And so if you're not paying attention to the risk that might challenge your operability, you're not going to be able to function when crisis hits. And so the quantification, again, as you touched on at the beginning with the question, it's very helpful. It helps explain the challenge that we're all engaged in, and it gives a framework to have a discussion where you can make those important asks for budget, resources, and other items. And then, again, be able to explain to your colleagues and others the roadmap that you happen to lay out and, in alignment, of course, with the business. And how it is that you're going to help enable the business get to where it wants to be. So these metrics are important, and like everyone else, I like seeing when we take steps forward in terms of building frameworks and being able to discuss these things with our colleagues in real terms that make sense to folks.
Well, MK, thanks for that. I want to shift gears a little bit here because another one of the things that I'm having a lot of conversations with my clients about is just a ton of new regulations that are being mandated by governments around cyber resilience. A couple of examples. So the Department of Defense now requires all suppliers and contractors to adhere to CMMC starting this month. And then the EU Council has also approved a wide-ranging Cybersecurity Act that went into effect earlier this summer. It's adopted by all the EU member states. And what can organizations do to ease the compliance efforts for these new regulations and others? Certainly with my healthcare clients, they're facing a raft of new regulations that specifically are impacting their business in a very direct way. How can we be effective in these compliance efforts?
Well, the first thing is to view it in the right context. Remember, compliance does not necessarily equate to effective security. It's important to note, I think, that these compliance standards as a baseline are absolutely necessary. So it's actually good to see some leadership at the government level when they establish these norms, when they establish these norms throughout certain industries. And it gives benchmarks, I think, for the security practitioners to practice towards in order to better enable their businesses. And of course, these compliance measures are based on the increased level of activity, again, we've seen from adversaries and the types of things that they do in order to gain entry into environments. And so it's a good note, I think. Again, we need as much leadership as we can get across the spectrum in the cybersecurity realm. Government certainly plays a role in that. But of course, it's the partnership between government and private sector that really levels up the ability of organizations to provide the kind of security measures that enterprises are going to need to protect themselves. So it's not a shock that governments set these standards for the enterprises to follow. One, if they want to do business with them, but even at much lower levels outside of the government, we see the need to, again, historically looking at breaches and things, we see the need to be able to levy standards on one another if we want to connect systems, if we want to enable businesses to operate. And so, again, I appreciate the leadership from a government perspective. There is a happy balance, right, or happy medium that we expect to see in terms of the compliance measures that are put on organizations. But as long as the private sector, I think, is participating in these conversations, again, that's where you get the integration between the two public and private partnerships so that we can align on what's best for the industry and also enable practitioners in the long run. So all in all, a good thing. But again, it's just a baseline. And if you're in compliance, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are hitting all the marks that you need to hit in order to both enable the business and protect it.
Exactly. So I want to touch on another topic that we talked about earlier, and that's enterprise automation and artificial intelligence. I mean, these things play a very important role in the overall cybersecurity program. But what's your experience in deploying AI and automation in your cyber risk programs?
Yeah, so a great experience with Palo Alto Networks. We've doubled down on our investment in automation and machine learning. And here's the truth of the matter. Adversaries have the same technologies available to them that businesses have in order to protect themselves. And we know that adversarial activity maintains heavy use of automation in terms of the attacks targeting organizations and enterprises. If they are using automation in their attacks, how is it that we expect a human sitting at the center of all of this to be able to correlate all of the information that's coming in from the various sources, your cloud posture, your endpoint, your network information, putting a human at the center of it? Of course, there should be a point where the human is engaged, making decisions, but there's a ton of work, a ton of things that can happen throughout the enterprise, and you can scale it through the use of AI and ML. So that protections, one, scale with the organization as it flexes its workforce. We're all now in this work from home mode or SASE mode, where the individual is at the center of all things in terms of access to business information, accessing information from all places, from home, on the go, wherever it is that they need to be. And we're seeing an increased access or use or need for access to this information. And so we have to really start thinking about information security in a different way. And at the same, while we expect humans to be engaged in nearly every aspect of the process, there's a ton that can happen before a human puts eyes on it. And so, again, organizations like Palo Alto Networks, the one that I work for, and others have seen this is where cybersecurity is headed. And so we need to make much more efficient use of AI and ML where we can. And again, as an organization, we've doubled down on that because we think that's where the industry is going.
MK, I want to go back to risk quantification and touch on that before we open this up to questions from the audience. But do you have any practical recommendations for security leaders or other organizations who are planning on incorporating risk quantification?
Make heavy use and reliance on the existing frameworks that are out there. I'm a big framework guy. I mean, maybe to my detriment. There are best practices. Our industry fellows and practitioners, people who really understand the deep technical side of cybersecurity, have established a of frameworks that allow us as practitioners to, again, have a roadmap to follow to enable our businesses and to engage in best practices that are agreed throughout the industry as ways of ensuring that you are in a position to both be resilient and to mitigate threats as they potentially enter your enterprise. And so these best practices, most practitioners are using them. I have my favorites, of course, that are out there and ones that I use against enterprises, both small and I think about frameworks like the CIS 20 critical security controls, one where I, took the extra step to dive a little bit more deeply into that and get a certification. I rely heavily on those types of things in order to frame and look at organizations to make an understanding as to, again, and going back to the beginning of my comments, how much investment an organization has made in terms of their security and where they've made those investments. And again, these frameworks give you a way to relate the gaps to your colleagues who are non-technical or non-InfoSec practitioners. You can relate gaps. You can show it visually. We all know that we actually, as humans, we learn best by visual data. So, things like dashboards, things, again, like quantifying risk, putting it in a way that folks can digest and understand is really the best way to go about explaining the challenges that we face. And again, I'm excited to see as new things come along, ways to go about quantifying those risks and again, visually showing what the challenges are within a particular environment. Where the challenges are, of course, to increase that visibility and to be in a position to both react to and proactively engage the threats that we know are out there on the landscape. So good things ahead, I think, for our industry.
Good, that's great to hear. So I definitely want to open up the forum for questions, and if you have any, we've got the capability, through the interface to take those. So, please send those in. MK, I just finished reading The Fifth Domain by Richard Clarke, and it really opened my eyes to cyber terrorism and everything that's going on, not just at a national defense level, but for the corporate level, individuals too. Your experiences with the FBI, I'd love to sit down over a beer sometime and pick your brain about that. I'm sure there's a lot of unique experiences there that you're bringing to bear in your work right now. So definitely, there are. So I like to read, and I'm curious if you've got a reading list too. So examples like The Fifth Domain, for cybersecurity for the layman. Are there other examples of things that you might recommend there?
There is an absolute place that I will recommend that all readers go, both practitioners and non-practitioners, and that's the Cybersecurity Canon, which is a project that was initially started by my former boss at Palo Alto Networks quite some time ago. Palo Alto Networks was a plank holder in the Cybersecurity Canon, where a committee of InfoSec professionals annually ingested a number of books on the cybersecurity landscape, some technical, some non-technical, and published a list annually of the books that they recommended, and along with short digest of exactly what the book was about, what the author we thought was we're trying to accomplish. The Cybersecurity Canon, again, started by Rick Howard, fascinating. I recommend to everyone who is a reader of cybersecurity information that you go to the Cybersecurity Canon. You can Google it. It's now been taken over, I believe, by The Ohio State University, and they are now managing the project. But it was, again, brainchild originally of Palo Alto Networks, and I would highly recommend you go to the Cybersecurity Canon and check out the books there. None of us, unless you're Bill Gates, none of us can digest a book a day or a book a week, I think, the way that he does. So what the Canon does is it lays out, here's the books that are must-reads for practitioners and those interested in the industry. And, of course, it goes down to the books that are, a nice to read, but maybe not a have to within the industry. So that's what I would recommend.
MK, that's great. I'm definitely going to check it out. So we did get a couple of questions from the audience coming in. So I'm going to start out with this one. So cyber risk quantification being an important aspect of achieving resilience, but we still don't see much adoption across industries. And this is per Deloitte 2019 cyber survey, where half the C-suite executives responded that they use any quantitative evaluation, while the other half is saying it's largely dependent on a very manual approach. Do you have any rationale about why that might be, that really only half of the people surveyed in this particular example were using these quantitative approaches?
Yeah, and I think some of that's a holdover, again, from older practices. Again, these ways of quantifying risk as it relates to cybersecurity are relatively new, although the practice of risk quantification has been quite some time. When you take those templates and put them over the cybersecurity industry, it gets to be a little difficult in terms of identifying methodologies. I think one of the more well-known models out there is the FAIR model, which is heavily utilized in industry nowadays. But the issue or the trick is, in terms of adoption, once folks become acquainted with a particular model and get comfortable with it, they tend to use it and take it with them wherever they go. So I think it's just a matter of time in terms of not mandatory adoption, but more wider adoption of particular risk assessment methods. And I think that as time goes on, and as the folks holding the purse demand more clarity in terms of the investments that enterprises will make, I think we'll see much more wider adoption of these things. We're already seeing organizations sort of pull back on their investments across the spectrum, of course, as it relates to the COVID-19 crisis. But as folks begin to realize that we need to be taking this time to shape how it is that we're going to come out of this crisis, they'll begin again to prioritize and look at where they're going to make investments. And I think risk quantification, again, is a good place to start, because it allows for you to have much wider conversations with your business colleagues when you can show visually, again, the gaps in your investment and your processes at a strategic level. And again, we all understand math. You understand low numbers and high numbers, and you understand where you fall on a particular spectrum. Everyone wants to overachieve, and you certainly you're underachieving. And when you can show that you're underachieving, again, set across a baseline, comparing yourself against others in the industry, it turns out to be a little bit of a push, I think, for the executives to make those investments where they need to.
MK, here's another question from the audience. How do I ensure that cyber risk is mitigated adequately and effectively in my organization? I have limited knowledge in ICT risk.
Yeah, well, pulling in expertise, looking for help within your ecosystem, heavy reliance on partners. Cybersecurity is a team sport. When I hear folks who think that they're engaged in this thing alone, and if you are alone, if you're a single individual or you have a small team, then it's more incumbent upon you, I think, to find out what other resources you might have to you in order to level up your capabilities while not overspending on the problem. And I think this is where the importance of partners comes in. You got to identify partners, not just, vendors out there who are trying to sell you things. You have to identify partners, folks who understand what your objectives are where you would like to be as a business, and then they help enable that process by making recommendations to you, not just of buying or consuming their tool set, but else you might want to look again to level up capabilities. We're in the midst of a capabilities challenge here, not a tool challenge. So folks should be looking for platforms that are integrated, that allow them cost savings while at the same time leveling up their capabilities. We can't continue to go on the heavy spend of identifying a single tool that changes the matrix on a single problem. We need to be looking more efficiently at how we solve cybersecurity problems, and just going out and buying random tools to solve problems to integrate it is not a solution that's going to help us moving forward.
So MK, I think we've got time for one more question here. And I think we've touched on this a little bit already, but what are your recommendations for peers on achieving cyber resilience? How to start and from where to start? And also, what is the role of automation in enterprise's cyber resilience journey?
Okay, so to, again, quickly hit on the automation piece. I think that, as practitioners, we have to be thinking more efficiently about how we're going to solve these problems. We all know that the cybersecurity industry suffers greatly in terms of the shortages, in terms of the workforce. That's not a quick add water and turn around answer that can be given on that. We have to feed the system from the ground up in order to generate more folks that are able to engage. But until we get to that point where we have enough folks with the skills and the desire to engage in the industry, again, I think that there's going to be heavy reliance on automation and machine learning, and there should be, so that we can, again, level up capabilities and ensure that we're hitting the marks on where we need to be. In terms of going back to the first part of the question, how does one get started? One, educate yourself. If you're the leader of a team, start listening. Listen to not only what your team is saying to you, but listen to your colleagues about where the business is and where the business is headed, and figure out how you can align the objectives of the security apparatus along with the business, and then seek help where needed, right? I mentioned in the last question this idea of aligning yourself with partners. There are those out there, certainly my organization considers ourselves a partner to our customers. Find a partner that's really going to help you achieve your objectives. And the true definition of a partner is one that will, support your objectives as a business, not theirs. In other words, they come to the table with, hey, I'm going to sell you this tool. The first question they need to be asking is, what are your challenges and how can I help you fix them or solve them? And then the second part of that is, will tell you when you're on the wrong path and when you're on the right path. And they have the ability to say, at this point, maybe my organization may not be the best to help you with that particular problem, but I have a partner organization out there that I think you can plug in. And so you got to ask questions, you got to listen, you got to engage partnerships, you got to engage your ecosystem, and look for help. One of the challenging things that I find, and I talk to lots of customers, I talk to lots of practitioners, and the most disappointing thing I find is when I talk to a practitioner who at least appears to me that they got all the questions answered. None of us have all the questions answered. And if you posture yourself as sort of absolutely knowing the answer to all and not even willing to listen to input to others, then I think you're setting yourself up for danger in the future. So listening is a huge part of that, having those hard conversations, but again, identifying partners, identifying an ecosystem, help level up your capabilities and help you get to where you need to be as an organization.
MK, I'm going to hit you with one more question before we wrap things up here, and it kind of has to do with that same topic of how do you get started. Question is, how do we build risk quantification? But first, how do we identify concerned and applicable hazards? Maybe scoring?
Yeah, scoring, maturity models, I think, is a good way to approach those things. No one likes the answer when the maturity model answer comes back to you. If you're on a scale of 1 to 5 and your organization gets a 2, no one should be happy with those maturity model answers. But it gives you a framework and a roadmap from which to start from. And there's practitioners out there, folks who have sort of, I won't say answered the mail, but you as an individual and your organization will not have encountered every challenge out there. But if you're listening to your colleagues in the industry, if you're plugged into the right resources, if you're digesting threat intelligence, that's relevant to your industry, relevant for your enterprise, it really can level up your capabilities. And again, so I can't emphasize enough this reliance on others to help make your apparatus a secure one and a resilient one. So you got to look outward as you understand your needs inward. You got to look outward for help and get help where you can. And there's lots of free resources out there. Again, some standards and things, by OWASP and others, ISC Squared, SANS Institute, and of course the Center for Internet Security. These are where you can go, again, to see these frameworks, these best configurations, gold standards, to help you get started on your pathway to the resiliency.
Well, MK, thanks a lot. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I think there's been a lot of valuable information that we've shared with our audience today. We're out of questions and out of time. I'm going to turn this back over to Peter, but MK, thanks again. Definitely appreciate it today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, what a fantastic session. Thank you to Jonathan and MK for their perspectives on risk quantification for cyber resilience. Okay, so we do have another poll question. Please go ahead and read the question and make your selections at your leisure. We'd appreciate that. And moving on, we have another case study, this time by, I'm going to try this. Interaction, I think is the name. And I'm going to invite Victoria Munoz-Titos from the UK office. She's a GRC advisor and a member of our customer success team to facilitate this session. Victoria, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the customer case study. I would like to introduce you to Sankan Mishra, who works as GRC Solution Architect at Interaction, and will be taking us this afternoon through their GRC journey. In his personal GRC journey, Sankan has worked with numerous organizations, creating solutions which have helped shape the organization's GRC landscape. Throughout his extensive career, Sankan has supported various organizations at different degrees of maturity. Some were just starting with compliance, others were in the middle of a chaotic compliance experience. Throughout all of this, Sankan recognizes that driving organizational GRC maturity can at times be a challenging endeavor, yet this is a challenge Sankan loves. Sankan, welcome.
Thank you.
I will now hand over to you so you can take us through your experiences at Interaction. Thank you very much, Sankan.
Thanks, Victoria. Thanks again, and hello, everyone. At this moment, I would like to take you through the journey which we went through when we have started with GRC. There were multiple things which we were thinking when we were going through, but still, I would like to take you through the major trigger points we were having when we were talking about GRC. So these were the trigger points. As you can easily see from the slide, that mostly it is about the increase of frameworks, auditors raising the bar, then overlap of the controls, then adopting a global approach. Likewise, there are many things which every organization is facing today, and these are the similar challenges for us. And these were the trigger points which took us towards buying a tool or procuring a tool which can help us in doing these GRC activities. Now, how a tool can help us? What will be those things which will change if we buy a tool? So primarily what will change is we get higher effectiveness. Higher effectiveness, how higher effectiveness? Because we will be using a consistent approach, which will be structured and uniform across the organization. What will change? It will change the Excel environment what we have, because not only it's not only Excel environment, it's just multiple Excel for same things in different organizations which we are having. And then everybody is reinventing their own compliance and doing things in different ways. So all these things can be changed if we adopt tool having greater effectiveness. What else can change? What else can we get help from a tool is we have regularly many deficiencies or few deficiencies coming out from the audits. All these deficiencies come and stay there in some reports. We don't have a track of those things, that how far we are, how we are closing them. By using a tool, we can have a clear visibility on all those things, our progress, how we are doing on each of those things. Our decisions can be driven through that. Then one very big point about elimination of overlaps. So if we have a tool, we can easily eliminate many overlaps which we have in different frameworks. If we talk about SOC 2, ISO 27001, 9001, any other control framework, they all have certain level of overlap. And when we do that multiple times, we are simply wasting our effort, having a lot of redundancy. Now, these were the things which triggered us, and we thought through before we bought the tool. Now, when we went into a procurement phase and we finalize metric stream. Now, it's just not buying metric stream which is going to simply solve all the problems. It's also the implementation of metric stream. And for that, if you buy that is something which is going to be a key for your success. Because if you are not implementing it properly, it's going to be challenging for you to solve the problems what you want to solve. So we prepare a roadmap for ourselves. What was that roadmap? We kept step-by-step approach where we saw that, okay, first of all, we input everything in the tool at first phase, which was our fragmented stage. Then once we have everything in our tool, we will try to align them together by reducing the overlaps. That was our integrated approach. Then after we achieve integrated approach, we look forward towards automation and we adopt an aligned approach, and then towards the optimized approach. These are 4 phases which we have designed. It can be different for you because of different maturity of the organization. It can be anything, but we have to find out a step-by-step approach. We cannot solve all the problems just at the first step. So we have this approach which we have adopted in Traction, for that matter. In other organizations also, I have worked with their maturity level and found out a roadmap for them. And this roadmap is actually extended over a time period. So it's not that I have to do all those 4 steps immediately when I'm doing the tool. No, it's divided over the time, one after another. So that's how we have started with implementation. What was my approach, basic approach of implementation? So basic approach was that tool is just one thing. We have to look at a whole spectrum. We have to see how our processes are, how much our people are trained in using the tool, how much they understand the process. And we took all those 3 things in unison. We have worked on 3 things at a similar level. When we say tool, we say we should have a tool which is useful for us, which is more closer towards our processes, which is helping us and which is easy to understand, giving better reporting. All these things were our key. And also it serves the purpose of reducing the overlaps, higher effectiveness, visibility, all these things. If we have all these boxes checked, then that's the right tool for us. And that's what I expect from a tool. And then what I did, and I always aspire to do, is that I also tweak the processes what we have slightly towards the tool. Because if we try to change the tool a lot, then we are going in a direction where we will not be more upgrade safe. We will have regular challenges with the adoption, what we have done in the tool. So we also have to keep the things as out of the box as possible, because those are more tested, more rigorously tested as a tool, and those will not have many defects as such when we start with the tool. So key is to keep it out of the box. Then important part is people. Whenever you will start with the implementation, from start, during the process, keep the people whom you want engaged and distribute as much as possible. You don't have to keep any centers of excellence. You have to keep the centers of excellence distributed over the organization. Every country, every entity shall have their own excellence, and they all shall serve the tool holistically, and they should know what they are expected to deliver from the tool. So training of those people, continuous training, not once, it can be twice, thrice, whenever, till the time they will not understand what they are expected to do. We have to keep tracking, training. This is how I did, and I see those things happening in other organizations as well previously, wherever I have worked, that you have to keep training people. This is a GRC tool. It's not any simple social networking site which anybody can simply use it. Now, when we have implemented the tool, obviously everybody was looking out of what we have gained through this. So we have seen some noticeable improvement in less than 1 year of implementation. And those noticeable improvements were basically that we were able to see all of our frameworks at one place. We can see our risk, control, policies, requirements aligned with each other. They were related to each other, and we can see how many risks are related to how many controls are related to how many policies, which requirements are satisfied, which requirements are not satisfied, how we are doing on our business objectives, control objectives, etc. All these things we were able to achieve in 1 year, within 1 year of implementation. We also have seen that our continuous control monitoring was key for our visibility, where we were testing each control which we have got from any control framework, or for that matter, our internal controls as well. And we were seeing the results on those controls. During audits, we have found those things very useful, because we already knew what are our problems, and we were already fixing them. So there were no surprises. We were really aware of the situation where we are. And also, we have kept a good track of our things. So our improvement was really focused towards what we want to change. It was not ad hoc. It was really planned, because we were having a good visibility of our systems. So this was a big improvement, and very good feedback from our management as well around the reports, whatever they have received, and how they are seeing the change coming through GRC in the systems. And when I had implemented the system, I always ensured that we should implement a system which is as general as it is possible. It should not be very specific to a department. It should be quite general. Then before I end, I have just 4 points to say before. If you're going for a tooling requirement, you just have to make sure that tool cannot fix all your problems. You have to keep everyone one page. And when I say everyone, it's about processes, system, people. All those things should go together to solve your problems, to bring a change, bring something different in your organization. Another point is GRC is a journey. You cannot expect something to change overnight. It will take time, and you have to always keep the expectations right. Then another point is distribute the work towards the organization. Don't keep the things centered at a few places. Just distribute the things as far as possible. And the architecture of system also shall support that. And then last point is automate. As far as possible, automate the controls, automate the evidences, whatever you have to achieve the efficiency while control execution. That was it from my side towards this. I will let you ask the questions if you have any, and over to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Sankant. Very, very insightful. It's always good to understand how different organizations handle their GRC journey. And indeed, we have some questions, so we can start going through them. Feel free to continue feeding the questions through for anyone in the audience interested in drilling more into the topics that we've covered. I'll start up with the first question. Could you share in more detail some of the benefits you've achieved so far with technology and what you anticipate in the future?
Yeah, sure. So the biggest thing what we have achieved is visibility. Because at earlier time when we were using Excels and other different mediums, we were not having a central visibility of our frameworks, and at one landscape we were not able to see at any point of time how we are faring in our control execution. That was one thing. Second thing was common processes. When we have no such system in place, understanding of processes differ from person to person. They do things in different way, and sometimes you have 11 versions of same thing in one organization. So that one thing again is achieved. Another thing, an informed decision making. That was something which we have achieved after implementing the tool, that we have got the results out of the system where we can see what are our pain points, what are the areas where we have to really improve, in what areas we are facing the problems in audit. If we are facing the problems in documentation, yes, why not? Let's get some expertise there and fix the problems. If we see that overall structure is not working, and that's what we get in multiple audits, yes, let's rethink about the structure what we have. Then if we have specific control failures in IT, so let's procure the systems which can solve those specific problems. So the informed decision making is one of the biggest positive what you can see from buying or procuring a tool which you can achieve. Yes, Victoria.
Thank you. We have got some more very good questions coming through. And the next one, the success of a technology solution lies with its implementation and adoption. What advice do you have for your peers who are in the process of implementing and rolling out a solution?
Yes, and I really agree that implementation is the key. How you are implementing a tool, that's going to determine how successful you are. So the biggest point is that keep the expectation clear at the start and take step-by-step approach. When you are taking step-by-step approach, then you are not trying to achieve a lot of things together. You are just going one by one. And when you are taking one by one challenges, your implementation will surely be a success. Now, if I dig deeper, then let's say if you are starting with if you are implementing a tool in an organization which has a very lower maturity. So first thing what you should do is to remove the silos where you have many people working on compliance in many different areas. Just bring them together and ask them to start using a tool to do the compliance. Because then tool will give them a uniformity, and also it will help them in standardizing the processes what they have. If you are a bit more mature, if you are on a maturity level where you have already standardized the processes, then I feel the next thing is to distribute work what you have as much as possible. So the design of implementation or the design of tool shall be in such a way that you can engage as many people as possible in the organization while doing the compliance. It's not a job of CISO to manage everything. It's a job of every employee in their work area to manage the respective compliance which they are supposed to manage. They should understand what is expected from them, and that can be done through continuous control monitoring, which we have done in our organization, and I have done previously in many other organizations. And that's pretty much a standard in European organization, that they really want to check the controls very frequently. And solution, yes. So think holistically. Think about what you want to see, where you want to see yourself in next 4 or 5 years in terms of maturity, and then only you can think about a final solution.
Thank you. We have got another question here. It's very interesting as well. How will the GRC tool assist my organization in achieving combined assurance for all the stakeholder groups?
Yes, very important point. Assurance is something which we all want to achieve whenever we are going for a compliance. So for assurance, it's a key that you should have a transparency towards the compliance whenever you are implementing anything, or if you are not implementing, then also the transparency is the key when we talk about assurance. How much ever we are transparent, that is going to determine how fair we are doing in terms of assurance. Then if we talk about our stakeholders, so if let's take an example, if my policies are at one platform which are also aligned with my risks, and I can showcase that all the risks are controlled fairly, then that's what all my stakeholders want to see, that my risks are covered and all my objectives will be met at the end of the year, because I don't have any risk in achieving those objectives. So that's one way of thinking towards that. Second way is if we think about really the audit cycle and auditors, how they will see to it. if we have transparency through the tool, we can easily show them that this is how we are looking at our compliance full framework, full landscape, and we can give them read access to those things, and they can just have a look at those things and get a better confidence before even the start of audit. And when you are in the audit, you already have answered many questions which would have come during the audit as a surprise. So it gives a better assurance when you go with a central repository of your frameworks and the testing and the work, whatever you are doing towards compliance.
Great answer. Another question, actually. Can you elaborate on how continuous control monitoring helped Intexion be more proactive with audits?
Yes, and this was really a big thing for us because when before buying the tool, we were not doing continuous control monitoring. When we bought the tool, the idea was that we will implement interaction control framework, and that interaction control framework will be tested on a regular interval by all the stakeholders what we have internally. If I have a control which is to be done by maintenance manager, then every month or every quarter or biannual, based on the control frequency, maintenance manager will receive a control which will have some test steps, and that person will do those controls. And at the central level, compliance manager will know exactly what the maintenance manager is feeling about that particular control. Although this was a tedious process, because we have to train each maintenance manager not only on the tool, also on the controls, because they were not too much familiar about the controls. So we traveled a lot, we talked a lot with all the stakeholders what we have, and in that process we created that awareness among people in the organization that everybody just started feeling about that the compliance is not a job of a compliance manager. It is everybody's task to do their control, whatever they have been assigned to. And every month or every quarter or biannual, based on frequency, they are submitting those controls. One person reviews those controls. If they are marking certain things ineffective, we are reaching out to them. We are asking them, what are those problems which you are facing, why you are marking these ineffective. Then they tell us that, okay, this is the reason why I'm marking ineffective. If we can solve the problems from a headquarter level, we solve the problem from headquarter level. Otherwise, we reach out to the local management and we ask them to solve the problems locally. So this way, because we heard everyone who is working on those particular controls one-to-one. We got direct inputs from them. So we were able to really channelize our efforts towards mitigating those things which were anticipated to come during the process. So this has helped us a lot. The challenge was the scale was very big. There were a lot of people to train, and also the affinity towards tool was not that great. So, but we just, as I said before, we have not hesitated in training one time or twice or thrice. And also while training, it's not always required face-to-face. You can use web mediums, which I'm using very frequently to train people. And they all are comfortable. I say within 1 year, I gave almost per person, if you say 2 to 3 trainings for different things or 4 trainings for different things. It was not that much. And I feel they are right now understanding the system quite well. And I don't have too many bad feedbacks from them about that this is not helping. They're all happy. They're all happy the way we have changed our continuous control monitoring.
Excellent. We have got another question. Control failures identified by internal audit and captured on the GRC tool, would that trigger the risk related to the audit process for a risk assessment?
Yes. What we do from the audits, if we get any findings, whatever findings these are, our opportunities for improvement even, when we record all those findings at one place, we associate the risks with them, And when we are assessing the risk, we can already see that what are those things which are already happening on these risks. There are certain points which we are already mitigating when we are assessing the risks. So this helped us a lot in aligning our risks towards the audit, towards what the results of the audit. Now, how it helped in our audit process is, suppose you got a problem while you were doing your continuous control monitoring, you have already raised issues. Now, during the audit process, you got findings similar. You have aligned those things together. So now you have two issues which you can align together. And you also see there is a risk associated to it. Now, if there is one risk which has many issues open, we cannot really wait for it. So there will be a concentrated effort toward closing all those issues or minimize the issues number towards that particular risk. And that has helped us in keeping our risk appetite at the level what we want. And apart from that, auditors are really happy to see that visibility of what we are doing at one place.
Thank you. We have got another question. How have the metric string applications, IT risk, GRC, or all of the apps supported the changes that have come about through the impact of COVID?
So I would say I will give you one very practical thing during this COVID. That previously our compliance was very much focused on physical audits. When we were visiting the locations, we were visiting, seeing, and then only we were finding the problems. Now, with the help of our ITGRC monitoring, which is done through continuous compliance, continuous control check, we can see the problems coming from the countryside, which we can already see at one place and fix them. Now, audit is something which we have also used in metric stream, and we are doing internal audits with questionnaires where we ask extended questions to understand what framework they have and also whether they have really completed the control things or not. This whole internal audit was completely a physical exercise. One person was visiting every country, and then he was collating all those things in reports, and then he was publishing those reports. Now, this whole process got automated. You have questionnaires which are sent to the person, they are answering those questionnaires, and then you can take answers from that questionnaires as a feedback for your audit. You have few things left to answer from the specific person, for which you can have a WebEx or a team session to understand from them, and you can even do web sessions to have a virtual walkthrough of the tool, of the full system, full landscape what they have. Apart from that, the risk assessment part was really, we have implemented risk assessment, which is quite interactive in nature. So those things were very much visible in the tool. So everybody was able to see the risk posture when we have all the things at one place. So this whole COVID duration was quite for us, or we have not faced many surprises, because we already have seen those things through our continuous control monitoring and risk assessments, whatever we have done, and those all were present at one place. So all COVID efforts, whatever business continuity problems can come, we already knew, and our efforts were focused towards those direction already. So we really never had any specific problem during COVID because we knew all our systems at one place very well.
Thank you very much, Sankan. That was a really insightful session. And I would like to thank you again for all your information, for all the experiences you've shared. And equally, I would like to thank our audience for all the good questions that we've received and for all the good answers that you've provided, Sankan. So thank you to everyone. And I think we can close here and move on to the next session.
great. Thank you, Samkant and Victoria. What a great panel. Absolutely great. All right, so as we know, cybersecurity and cyber risk professionals face two very diverse challenges. On the one hand, motivating IT teams to change routines and adopt security practices, and on the other, communicating a clear picture of the organization's cyber risk posture to senior execs. To double-click and dive into this topic, I'm going to invite Thomas Ludwig, Vice President, Customer Success and Quality at MetricStream, to moderate a panel discussion on the role of end-to-end visibility in achieving a holistic IT GRC. Thomas, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning here from California. Good evening to our audience in Asia. Good afternoon to the East Coast. We have a great panel here addressing that topic of end-to-end visibility, by which we really mean making sure that if different people look at different topics from different perspectives, they are talking about the same thing. Our panel has different dimensions to bring to the table. The first, let me introduce our panel here. Helen Yu is the founder and chief executive officer of Tiger Advisory. She has a great perspective in bringing companies up to speed. Our second panelist is Cynthia Cox, who's responsible for security and compliance at Marqeta. And our third speaker is Komitas Stepanyan, who is the CIO at the Central Bank of Armenia. Helen, can you briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Thomas. Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here today. I'm the founder and CEO of Tiger Advisory. It's a pleasure being here with everyone today.
Cynthia, can you give us just a brief intro for yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Cynthia, and I've been practicing GRC and cybersecurity for the last 18 plus years at some large companies like Symantec and KPMG as an auditor, and Palo Alto Networks prior to my time at Marqeta. And I pretty much touched all the disciplines of GRC, whether they be policies, customer, supplier trust, privacy. It's all been fun, and I love learning all about it in here with you guys today.
Thank you, Cynthia. Komitas, to you. Thanks for joining us. It's quite late in Armenia.
Yes. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. It's a great pleasure to join to this panel. I'm quite new CIO. Just a month I'm sitting in this position as a CIO. Before that, I was auditing whole IT and cybersecurity employees and the service at the Central Bank of Armenia. And I cooperate very closely with the IMF and the World Bank as a cybersecurity expert.
Thank you so much. Let's get started. I would ask you to share your perspective, and I think we have three very different perspectives from different cybersecurity professionals. If you have listened to the sessions early in the day, it's very evident that one key role, for instance, of a chief information security officer is always to bring together the business perspective and the IT perspective, but there are many other perspectives to look at. And I think, Helen, at Tigon, you have worked with lots of companies basically on integrating these perspectives. Can you share briefly how you look at this topic?
Sure, Thomas. Let me first highlight the three most common cybersecurity priorities: the shift from prevention to resilience, the focus on data privacy, and then third-party supply chain risk mitigation. So building a culture of cybersecurity does not happen by default. It takes vision, planning, and investment. The common denominator is that cybersecurity controls consistently revolve around three key factors: people, processes, and technology. This is why having a single source to truth will help organizations better understand how your employees use, manage, and exchange data, how work takes place, what checks and balances you have established, and if, when, and where organizations should make investment.
Thank you, Helen. I think this focus on changing a culture is essential to all of us. Cynthia, how would you summarize this whole topic of end-to-end visibility?
I think that you guys may be familiar with this saying. It came from a movie called Follow the Money, and it was really talking about fraud and following the money to figure out what really happened. And I think in our field, we really need to change that catchphrase to follow the data. So for me, in order to really drive end-to-end visibility, enable our businesses to make good decisions, we have to really understand the data lifecycle. So if you look at it, you're thinking, where's the data created? A lot of times we're getting data from our third party. So there's your third party risk management, you're generating data from your customers. There's going to be privacy concerns about that as well. You're going to be asking, where's your data stored? Again, your cloud providers is a key component of that as well. Your resiliency also, right? Because where is it stored? Can you back up? Is it encrypted? All those really great controls there. I think once it's in your data set, once it's within your boundaries, you also have to think about who's using it. Who are my users? Where are they located? Do I have geographical issues? Do I have concerns about duplication? I think we've all been really surprised throughout our multiple audits to learn about a new data lake that we never knew about before. And, we find out that a lot of times that QA has data that maybe wasn't properly sanitized, those type of things. And then finally, the end of the life cycle is obviously the data retention, how long. You have regulatory requirements. We have privacy requirements with the DSAR, and then how is it purged? Same idea, especially with the DSAR, the data subject access request. We really need to make sure that we can delete that data. And the only way that we can have this end-to-end visibility and uncover those crown jewels and those key risks is by understanding how data is transformed, how is it used, how is it stored, so on and so forth.
Thank you, Cynthia. I think we already have two great perspectives of what it means to have end-to-end visibility. Helen said it's really about the cultural view from different perspectives. Cynthia, you just said it's really about the data, because data have their own life cycle at different stages of the life cycle. Different things can happen. Kamitas, what is your perspective? I think you have this unique position of being a cybersecurity professional, but at the same time, representing the Central Bank of Armenia, you also have the role of regulating basically other players in the industry. So what is your perspective?
Thank you very much, Thomas. It's really a great question. I fully agree with my colleagues about concept of people, process, and technologies. And I would like to emphasize people component or people domain. When we say cybersecurity is not there by default, and culture is very crucial component or very important component, and we are in a GRC summit, although I have a deep technical knowledge and I can talk about, backups, encryption, etc., I would like to share my perspective from governance view. I think cybersecurity governance is one of the main components, because you may have state-of-art technologies, you may have, the best mature processes. Without proper leadership from top management, without proper culture in your organization, you cannot reach the proper level of cybersecurity and proper level of cyber resilience. So organizational leadership coming from the top management is the crucial component of this people, process, technology triangle. But what concerns to the perspective of the regulator as a Central Bank of Armenia, or many central banks are regulators for the financial sector. Central bank as an organization is very regulated one, and we have that responsibility to regulate our financial sector. From our perspective, we have already implemented some standards like ISO 27001 in our organization, and now it's required for all financial players. Credit companies, commercial banks, insurance companies, and other institutions like payment system organizations. They have to comply with ISO 27001, which is also part of governance. So from my perspective, governance is one of the main components of dealing today cybersecurity risks, and to come to a good point to say my organization is ready to deal with cyber threats nowadays.
Thank you, Komitas. This brings really up a very interesting perspective. And Helen, I would actually ask you to comment on that. In this specific situation of a regulator on the one hand, and you typically working with companies to accelerate their journey to a more resilient organization, how do you see actually this? How does it feel to talk to a regulator here? What's your feeling about that? What's your experience? How the regulator really shapes what you have to do as an enterprise?
That's a great question, Thomas. I will give you a typical consultant answer. It all depends. If I were a financial service info security professional, I would have so much to do that already exceeding any realistic capacity. Then, getting or to deal with the regulator is definitely not on my bucket list. However, as an individual and consumer who have often been the victim of identity theft, we can all appreciate the need for all business that maintain this important data of ours to be on the same page as what it means to protect our data. So I would say, they're both friend and foe.
Thank you, Helen. You just basically redirected to the topic that Cynthia had brought up earlier. Of course, if we talk about end-to-end visibility, data is somehow central. Cynthia, you had brought that up earlier, the data lifecycle, how we can create consistency. How do you see that in this context of regulatory requirements and, of course, normal business requirements?
Yeah, actually, I'd have to say, just as a follow-up, that my regulators, I think, are, in general, a great thing, because just like in security, unfortunately, we have to take advantage of a well-timed breach, because I think we all know from the stories that after a breach occurred, that's kind of when you have management's ear, and you really have to capitalize on that. And so I have to say that using the role of the regulator to say, well, you have to do this because the regulator said so, is actually a really good hammer to use when necessary. So I definitely have to appreciate that component of the regulator. Now, I will say, as Komitas mentioned, ISO 27001 is definitely an international standard. It's right there in the title. Whereas in the US, we might be more focused on maybe some of the NIST standards or the SOC 1 and the SOC 2. So definitely one of the rules that I like to do in the GRC space is to harmonize my control frameworks, because in your industry, you're going to have specific frameworks as well. You're going to have HIPAA, maybe if you're in healthcare, or if you're in education, you have others. The list, unfortunately, is a complete alphabet soup, and it's really overwhelming. And we have to remember audit fatigue on our stakeholder side. So our role is really to make sure we harmonize those control frames so that we can do that, one control to many, and, really make sure we're focused on the right controls for our industry, for our customers, for, best practices, whatever that means. And, by harmonizing control framework, we can have a really clear message to management what the key risks are.
Thank you, Cynthia. I think this brings up really a great perspective. When we talk about end-to-end visibility, harmonizing controls is really central. And I would actually like to play that back to you, Komitas. This whole point of having multiple frameworks, obviously you're to some extent the framework setter when you decide that ISO 27001 is the key framework for the banks and financial institutions in Armenia. But I think the topic is also pertinent to you. End-to-end visibility, I think what Cynthia just said, is also making sure that if we have 10 different frameworks, that we still have a harmonized view, that we're really talking about the same thing through all these frameworks. And for instance, in the US, the FFIEC cyber advisory tool is somehow the standard tool for most banks. That's the starting point. That in turn is mapped to things like NIST SP 853 or to NIST CSF. So what's your take on this, and specifically also in the context, how this is evolving? ISO 27001 is now 7 years old, so it is to some extent dated. So what's your perspective on these multiple frameworks and being consistent across these?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's another great question. I can share something from my experience working as an employee of the central bank, and some experience from being a cybersecurity expert and traveling lots of countries with IMF to share some experience with other colleagues from worldwide. So, when you are using different frameworks, from one hand, it's an opportunity to be sure that you are not missing something. It's very important. But on the other hand, when you have 10 different frameworks, sometimes you need to harmonize, and sometimes you have to do lots of doubling. So you are doing something based on the one framework. When we are looking at the second framework, you see that most of the part of the first framework is already included in the second one. Before implementing and before coming to the conclusion that we need to implement ISO 27001, we were using COVID framework, which from my perspective is one of the best governance framework for governing IT, information or cybersecurity. Today, there is another one, NIST, and you already mentioned FFIEC, which is one of my favorite frameworks. But there is one important issue there. Sometimes I saw that some people just download some NIST or FFIEC framework and try to translate by their own national language, because, for example, in Armenia, we use our national language. In African countries, they use their own, and they are just downloading this framework and trying to use by their own. And if you look at the FFIEC, I can bring just one small example. There is inherent risk assessment part of the FFIEC framework, and there is a question about service providers. For example, if you have from 1 to 3 service providers, 1 to 5 service providers, it means your risk is very low. If you have from 10 to 15, your risk is medium, and if you have over 50 service providers, insurance service providers, then your risk is high. For example, in my country, we have like 3 service providers overall in the country. So this framework doesn't suit for my needs, and I need to implement this framework which really cover our needs based on our situation. So in some countries, I saw that people are just looking these tools. They are using these tools to assess their cybersecurity readiness or maturity based on the FFIEC, and at the end, they get some wrong results. Why we use this ISO 27001? Because we did lots of research that time. That part of time, it was 2007, if I'm not mistaken, and I was the first responsible person in the Central Bank of Armenia, and I'm proud of that. I was in the roots of implementing the standard in our bank. At that point of time, it was one of the best. But once again, before implementing this, we were using COVID, and COVID has its own matching tables with the ISO 27001. And when we did our first assessment, self-assessment, how many % of our processes are compliant with the ISO 27001, it was like more than 85%. So even when you are using one framework, you can use lots of matching tables, lots of harmonizing tools to be sure that you are covering all aspects of cybersecurity. Doesn't matter which framework you use.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kamitas. I think that really extends the point that Cynthia had made. Harmonization really of controls is really relying on these multiple mappings between the frameworks. And I also have to say I love how we're really diving into the detail, how these different frameworks interact. Because if we talk about a consistent view across the organization, it's also a consistent view on frameworks. The other thing that I think is really interesting, and Helen, it would be great if you could share your perspective on that, is that you, Kamitas, you just brought in the third-party aspect, service providers, and of course for all of us, more and more of our business is really not conducted by ourselves, but by third parties, by fourth parties, fifth parties, because of course they have their own partners. The interesting thing here is, and I think ISO 27001 has the big advantage, there's a certification. You can ask your partner to certify, so you have immediately that binding element that you can know on a certain level as much about your partner as about yourself because they're ISO certified. The question to you, Helen, is really if you see that that whole linkage to third parties and your point earlier about the common culture. Obviously, having a security culture is difficult enough in a large organization. If we talk about third parties, how do you really keep that together? Having a shared culture across hundreds of partners and third parties is really a challenge. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very on top of every company's mind, right? We offer managed security service to organizations. Oftentimes with limited capital and competing priorities, we see the company push cybersecurity to the end of list. They don't really get us engaged until it's too late. So what we working with them, we help educate their board and CEO and executive team, right? That's from people perspective, because it's so important to have a culture starting from the top that people understand. It's so important to understand the importance of cybersecurity. And then we also really help organizations to establish regular employee training. The training should be beyond the new hire onboarding training. The entire workforce needs to be educated. From process perspective, we help them perform an audit to assess risk landscape. It's so important for companies to understand who manage their cybersecurity, what training the employees already have today versus where the gaps is, and also what are processes they have in place to keep their organization secure, and what are the crown jewels to protect, understand the risk associated with third party and supply chain. So we usually started off with an inventory list of all the third party vendors they have and supply chain they have to manage, and then understand where the risk endpoint they have to have, and then where the risk might be. And then we also help them establish a cadence to explore the cyber risk. Right, I think Kamita has mentioned about NIST earlier, the framework, and the ISO. There are all sorts of different framework. Depends on what industry we're working with. With a highly regulated industry, they may have even more in-depth of compliance they have to follow. And then most importantly, only having the framework does not really help. Most importantly, we help the organization to establish a cross-functional metrics that pertain to cyber risk and cybersecurity. So that's not just an IT job. There's business functions, every single parts of the organizational function, the responsibility to ensure a resilient, secure workplace. Thirdly, is from technology perspective, we help organizations to build layers of defense, right? When I talk about that, it's not just a firewall, it's admin, passphrases, multi-factor authentication, access management, auditing system, SOCs, and this whole 9 yards, right? We talk about defense in depth. And then also, most importantly, to automate that monitoring process to allow the organization to understand the cybersecurity performance and also align their investment with the real world risk. So those are the things that I think it's really critical for organizations to look at from people, process, and technology perspective. That's how they can build a culture when working with third-party vendors or supply chain suppliers.
Thank you, Helen. I think this is a great perspective, and I would like to actually ask Kamita as a question around one point that Helen just made. She said at the core of it is also having metrics. So obviously it's about multiple dimensions, but in order to make sure that people look at the topic in the same way, the metrics are really essential. And there are, of course, many metrics that we see a lot now are cyber maturity metrics, where you rate a certain part of the organization in a certain aspect as a 5 or as a 3. And let me redirect that to you, Kamita, from a regulatory perspective. And sorry that you have to play that role of the regulator here all the time.
No problem.
Are you actually in a position to go out and say, yeah, you are a bank and I rate you as a 3 in some dimension? Or how do you feel about doing these kinds of judgments? I think in our experience, it really helps to make this judgment. And it's not like a grade in school where you have a pass or fail. It's more a path to improvement. So how do you see this whole metrics element in terms of creating that end-to-end visibility?
Yeah. This is the most important part of cybersecurity, I think. First of all, I would like to bring one small sentence from COVID. In COVID, you can find something like this. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So if we can't measure something, we can say we are doing this thing in a good way, or we need to improve something. So when we are talking about measures, we need to have proper key performance indicators and key risk indicators. Working with the World Bank, I've been a cybersecurity expert, and I developed special KPIs and key risk indicators for banking sector, for financial sector. Let's say for particular jurisdiction, I cannot say the name of the jurisdiction, but this is going to be a common practice for all kinds of jurisdictions, all countries, to have proper measures to implement and then measure as a regulator to be sure that everything under the control, I mean cybersecurity risks under the control in the financial sector. I have my own vision, and I'm going to do the following. I'm going to do the following. I mean Central Bank of Armenia. Before coming to this position, I was deputy head of internal audit, and I was closely working with the methodology department, who is responsible for creating and implementing that measures. So now I'm working as a CIO, who is responsible IT and information cybersecurity. We are closely working to use this FFIC cybersecurity maturity tool, but we need to update lots of questions based on our situation. Once again, in our country, we have just 3 internet service providers, and we need to change some weights of questions, and using this FFIC tool to create our own. And later on, we are going to use this tool to assess all commercial banks and financial institutions. And I look at this picture like a puzzle. Whenever I have already results of each financial institution, I can put them in one big chart like this map back in my wall, and I can see that in financial sector we have this certain risk. Because if we identify that this particular risk exists in, I don't know, systemically important bank 1, bank 2, and this systemically important organization, then we can say, okay, this risk is out or is over our risk appetite, and we need to do our steps to mitigate this risk, and this risk must be under our risk appetite. This is my perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Camilo, so much. We're actually reaching the point where we have to think about closing up. Cynthia, I would like to ask you to comment on one element here and also basically make your closing statement as we're coming to an end point. You had brought up the element of harmonized controls, and in the very beginning, the element of the data lifecycle. If we link that topic to the metrics, do you see some kind of future where we will have a much clearer way of measuring how well we're doing in terms of data lifecycle or in terms of our controls frameworks? Or what do you think is the practical next step? How do you see the future for these elements?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm not going to say this is easy, but I would say that unfortunately continuous monitoring and automation, I think, is the way to go, especially as we're scaling and moving into the cloud, into the third-party providers that we don't have overall visibility. So you have to be able to control what you can control. And if you wait until that 1-year audit or that quarterly, user access review, that's just too late. And so really by scaling and automating through, you can implement many tools to make sure like your cloud configurations are closed, that people aren't accessing these are the ways that you're going to really be able to drive some real-time operational metrics and really be able to give that visibility on real time. Like I said, if you wait until that audit or that, your external auditors come in, it's just too late and you have too much to remediate. So to really measure things, try to implement, discovery tools, things that will continuously monitor for configuration changes, et cetera, to really give your leadership the right visibility.
Thank you, Cynthia. I think this is actually an excellent path to closing our session. I'm just hearing we have a few audience questions that we will address. The first one was actually specifically directed to you, Cynthia. What's the best way to harmonize frameworks? Is there a tool you prefer? And also part of the question is NIST continues to add controls. So we're coming now to Ref 5. That's a reference to NIST SP 853. Yeah, question to you, Cynthia. Is there a best way to do this?
There are definitely tools, and I'm sure MetricStream would be happy to talk to you about that. But I would say that I really find it's important to anchor yourself to one framework, whether that's the ISO 27001, which has been tried and true. It's generic enough yet specific enough to cover all the domains. And then to Kamita's point, you have to really adjust it to you and your business model. But in the US, the NIST cybersecurity framework is another really great one. I really particularly like the images that they provided with the 5 different pillars. I think that really helps people who are not in cybersecurity understand the concept of what you're trying to do. You're trying to protect, respond, etc. So, unfortunately, I wouldn't say that there's the right way or the best way. There's just many ways. And unfortunately, a lot of them have to do with Excel spreadsheets or implementing a common control framework through a tool such as MetricStream.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And I think we all agree there's no best way. And I think in the question, this was not really, there was no expectation that you say there's the golden solution here. The next question, and I think Helen, I would like to ask you about, ask you to respond. That's a little bit in the COVID-19 context. What tactical approaches can be taken to ensure cyber resilience for remote workers, and also specifically in the education sector, remote learning? Obviously, we all know in the current context that this is a huge topic.
Yeah, I will start with a couple metrics, right? 90% of the incident involved people working within the company. With all the remote working, oftentimes the employees use their personal device to handle the work that expose, really expose the company even higher chance of being attacked. And then on average, each attack cost the company $3.86 million. So that's being said, it's so critical, right? I talk about the people, process, technology perspective. Organization really need to have an inventory list, right? Do an audit, understand what are the endpoint security they have, who has access to what system, and then who has remote access to their system. If they do they have VPN in place, for example? What are the firewalls they have? And then also, if you have a global workforce, you have also to understand the dynamic of that, and then where the risk points are, and then having the audit. And I would say perform that audit is having really assess your risk landscape to begin with. That's the first tactical step I would go with, and really have a much deeper understanding about if you build a defense, you build a layers of defense, and what are the layers going to be included in there. So that's the first thing I would do.
Thank you very much, Helen, for the answer. I think it's a hallmark of a great panel that we're running out of time. I think we're going very deep, and I think the 4 of us, we could continue for a few hours. Let me just take the last question from our audience, and I'm sorry we have to limit to this last one. And I would ask Kamita to comment on it. It's basically a question how to summarize our whole panel, if you will. End-to-end visibility is a must-have for an enterprise to operate effectively. So what's the role of cyber risk management in this? And what are the key steps an organization should take to ensure 360-degree visibility? Can you take a stab at that, Kamita? That's, of course, like the very big picture question.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great question. It's really a great question. And I started my talk talking about governance. So when you're talking about cyber risk management, risk management is also part of governance. And sometimes some professionals say cybersecurity is more about people and less about technologies. I would like to rephrase this and say cybersecurity is about people and technologies. Without technologies, we cannot deal with cybersecurity risk. Without people, we cannot deal with the cybersecurity risk. Without proper governance, we cannot do that. So let me just bring one example and finish this panel. Today we had a phishing attack, and imagine how busy is governor of the central bank. But he found time to forward this phishing email to me and for my colleagues to work on and stop this phishing attack. So this is part of culture. When top management leadership create proper culture in the organization, when people working in the organization think that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, then I can say there is proper atmosphere, there is proper culture in that organization, and we can say we are doing right things in the right way. Thank you.
I think that is a statement where I don't want to add anything. Thank you. So other than thank you, Helen, thank you, Cynthia, thank you, Kamitas. This was a really fun conversation, and I hope we will continue this soon. Thank you very much. And thank you for our audience for staying on. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great. Thank you, Thomas and team there, for a fantastic panel to wrap us up today. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for our GRC Summit Leadership Series event today. We had a great day with numerous global thought leaders sharing their insights and perspectives on building out cyber resilience and thinking beyond cyber risk. We also covered how to quantify IT and cyber risks in business terms, achieving resilience with automation and risk quantification, and the role of end-to-end visibility in achieving holistic IT GRC. We had those leaders from Standard Chartered Bank, Cummins, Bharti Airtel, Palo Alto Networks, Interxion, Central Bank of America, T-Gon Advisory Corp, and Marqeta. So next up, we have our biannual GRC Summit, and this is from the 16th to the 18th of November. And as I'm sure most of you are aware, this is our keynote, one of our 2 keynote summits for the year. And this will feature 70 plus speakers over 50 plus sessions over 3 days. And to learn more, simple, just visit grcsummit.com/2020. That's grcsummit.com/2020. Thank you so much for your time today. We hope you found the sessions insightful. And until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.